I showed up to my wife's law firm opening party only to see everyone laughing and pointing. Testron husband is here. Then my wife handed me an envelope. The first job of my firm is our divorce, sign, and leave. So I walked away, quietly canceled every payment, party, trip, and pulled out my $20 million investment to her firm. Minutes later, my phone lit up with 456 missed calls, and someone showed up at my door. You know what they say about karma? Sometimes she's a patient bitch who takes her sweet time. But tonight, as I'm walking into the Hilton atrium wearing my best Tom Ford suit and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, I have no clue that karma's about to clock in for overtime. The place is absolutely buzzing. Crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across marble floors that probably cost more than most people's cars. I can smell success in the air, mixed with overpriced champagne, and that particular brand of arrogance that only comes from lawyers who think they've made it big. The irony? Every damn penny of this extravaganza came from my bank account. I'm Marcus Hale, 42 years old, and I've got that self-made swagger that comes from turning a small tech startup into a multi-million-dollar empire while everyone else was still figuring out how to use email without accidentally hitting reply all. Tonight's supposed to be the grand opening of Hale and Winters LLP, my wife's dream law firm that I've been bankrolling like some kind of legal sugar daddy. As I make my way through the crowd, nodding at faces I recognize from country club dinners and charity galas, I'm actually feeling pretty damn good about myself. This is my moment too, right? I mean, without Marcus Hale's deep pockets, there wouldn't be any Hale and Winters LLP. There wouldn't be this fancy party with its ice sculptures and champagne fountains that look like they belong in a Vegas hotel lobby. But then I hear it, this snide little comment that cuts through the party chatter like a knife through butter. Some young associate, probably fresh out of law school and still wet behind the ears, leans over to his buddy and says with a smirk, well, looks like the test-run husband is here. Test-run husband. The words hit me like a slap across the face, but I keep walking, keep smiling, because that's what you do when you're Marcus Hale. You don't let some nobody in a cheap suit see you sweat. But inside, something cold and sharp is starting to twist in my gut. I scan the room looking for Clara, and there she is, my wife of 8 years, standing at the podium like she owns the world. And damn it, she looks absolutely stunning. Her dark hair is pulled back in this perfect chignon that probably took her stylist 2 hours to achieve, and she's wearing that diamond necklace I bought her for our anniversary last year. The one that cost more than most people make in a decade. She's glowing under those chandelier lights, fielding congratulations and air kisses from everyone who matters in the New York legal scene. Judge Robert Winters, her father and one of the most powerful men in the city's judicial system, is beaming with pride from his front row seat. Victor Cross, her business partner and the guy I've been writing checks to for the past 2 years, is standing just off to the side, looking smug as hell in his custom-tailored Armani. Clara catches my eye and smiles. But something's off. It's not the warm, genuine smile I fell in love with all those years ago. This one's different, calculated, like she's already rehearsed what comes next. She taps her champagne glass with a silver spoon, and the room falls silent. Every face turns toward the podium. Every conversation stops mid-sentence. You could hear a pin drop in this place, which is saying something considering we're in the middle of Manhattan. Ladies and gentlemen, Clara begins, her voice carrying that smooth, confident tone she uses in court. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the launch of Hale and Winters LLP. This firm represents everything I've worked for, everything I've dreamed of since I was a little girl sitting in my father's courtroom. The crowd murmurs appreciatively. Someone shouts, "Here, here," and raises their glass. But then Clara does something that makes my blood run cold. She reaches into her clutch, the same Chanel bag I bought her for Christmas, and pulls out a manila envelope. Plain, unremarkable, the kind of envelope that could contain anything from tax documents to grocery coupons. However, she continues, and I swear the temperature in the room drops about 10 degrees. Before we officially open our doors to serve justice in this city, I have one piece of business to attend to. She walks down from the podium, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Every step brings her closer to where I'm standing, and every step makes that cold feeling in my stomach spread a little further. The crowd parts like the Red Sea as she approaches. I can feel hundreds of eyes on me, can hear the whispers starting to buzz around the room like angry wasps. Someone's phone camera flashes, then another. Clara stops right in front of me, close enough that I can smell her perfume. The same Chanel No. 5 she's worn since our second date. She's still smiling, but now I can see what that smile really is. It's not love or gratitude or even basic human decency. It's pity mixed with something that looks disturbingly like satisfaction. "Marcus," she says, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You've been so generous, so supportive, and I want everyone here to know that the first case Hale and Winters LLP will be handling is very close to my heart." She hands me the envelope like she's presenting me with an award at some twisted ceremony. The paper feels heavy in my hands, weighted with possibilities I don't want to consider. "The first case for my law firm," she announces, turning back to address the crowd with that same practiced smile, "is my divorce. Marcus, I need you to sign these papers and leave. Tonight." The words hang in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. For a moment, everything is perfectly silent. Then the applause starts, scattered at first, then growing louder. Some people are gasping, covering their mouths with their hands like they're watching a car crash in slow motion. Others are filming with their phones, probably already uploading to social media with hashtags like #LawyerLife and #PowerMove. I stand there holding that envelope, feeling like the biggest fool who ever walked the earth. This is my money funding this party. These are my connections filling this room. I'm the one who made this entire night possible, and now I'm being dismissed like some kind of hired help who's overstayed his welcome. The humiliation should be crushing. The betrayal should bring me to my knees. 8 years of marriage, 2 years of supporting her dream firm, $20 million of my own money, all of it reduced to a manila envelope, and a public execution in front of everyone who matters in New York's legal community. But you know what? I don't shout. I don't throw the envelope back in her face. I don't cause the scene that everyone's probably expecting, the dramatic meltdown that would give them something to gossip about at their country club brunches for the next 6 months. Instead, I do something that probably surprises everyone in that room, maybe even myself. I fold that envelope in half, slide it into my jacket pocket, and walk toward the exit with my head held high. As I push through the crowd, I can hear the whispers starting up again, can feel their eyes following my every move. But I keep walking, past the ice sculptures and champagne fountains, past the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, past everything I paid for but apparently never owned. Outside, the New York night air hits my face like a blessing. I loosen my tie, let the cool breeze wash away the stuffiness of that overpriced hotel ballroom. And then, standing there on the sidewalk with the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, I do something that would probably shock everyone still inside celebrating my public humiliation. I smile. Not the fake, practice smile I've been wearing all evening, but a real one. Faint, but genuine. See, here's the thing about being Marcus Hale that none of those people in that room understand. I didn't get where I am by being stupid. I didn't build a multi-million-dollar empire by trusting people at their word. And I sure as hell didn't survive in the cutthroat world of business by not having a few contingency plans up my sleeve. They think they've won. They think this is the end of the story. The foolish husband who got played by his ambitious wife and her slick business partner. They think Marcus Hale just got taken for the ride of his life. They haven't seen anything yet. The real game? It's just getting started. You know what's funny about betrayal? It's like food poisoning. At first, you're just confused and uncomfortable, but then it hits you all at once, and suddenly you're seeing everything with crystal clarity. By the time I get back to my apartment on the Upper East Side, that clarity is burning through me like acid. I pour myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25, the good stuff I save for special occasions, though I'm pretty sure getting publicly divorced at your wife's law firm launch party qualifies as special in the most twisted way possible. The amber liquid burns going down, but it's nothing compared to the fire that's been building in my chest since I walked out of that circus. My apartment feels different now. Quieter. All those little touches that screamed successful married couple. The matching throw pillows Clara insisted on. The wedding photos in their expensive frames. The abstract art she picked out because it was investment pieces. Now they just look like props from a play I didn't know I was starring in. But I'm not here for a pity party. I've got work to do. I head straight to my study, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a million-dollar view of Central Park. Most people think the view is what makes this room special, but they'd be wrong. The real magic is behind the custom-built bookshelf, where a hidden panel slides away to reveal my private safe. This isn't some dinky hotel room safe where you stash your passport and a few $100. This is a proper vault, fireproof, waterproof, and big enough to hold everything that really matters. I punch in the code, and the heavy door swings open with a satisfying click. Inside, organized with the kind of obsessive precision that would make a Swiss banker weep with joy, are my primary assets. Not stocks or bonds or crypto wallets. Those are for amateurs. No, these are the documents that separate the players from the played, the hunters from the hunted. I pull out the first binder, thick as a phone book and labeled in my own handwriting. Hale and Winters LLP. Financial structure. Every page tells a story, and boy, is it a doozy. Here's what Clara and her smug partner Victor didn't understand about Marcus Hale. I don't just throw money at things and hope for the best. When I invest, I document everything. When I write a check, I create a paper trail that could be followed by a blind accountant with dyslexia. The first section shows the initial seed money, $5 million transferred from my personal account to establish the firm's operating capital. Clara thought it was a gift, a loving husband supporting his wife's dreams. In reality, it was a loan with very specific terms that she never bothered to read because she was too busy picking out office furniture and planning launch parties. Next up, the office lease. That gorgeous corner suite on Madison Avenue with the mahogany conference table and the view of the Chrysler Building? The one that costs $40,000 a month? Yeah, that's in my name. The lease agreement sits right here in black and white, along with the security deposit receipt for $200,000. I flip through more pages, each one a little insurance policy I never thought I'd need to cash in. Interior design costs, another $250,000 for Clara's vision of sophisticated legal elegance. The custom law library with its first edition legal texts and hand-carved shelving, 6 figures. The state-of-the-art computer system and case management software, another $100,000. But the real kicker is the recruitment expenses. Clara and Victor went on a hiring spree like they were building the legal equivalent of the Yankees. They poached senior associates from white shoe firms, offering signing bonuses and inflated salaries that would make Wall Street executives jealous. Every single one of those offers was backed by my money, and every single contract includes a clause that ties their employment to the firm's financial stability. As I'm going through these documents, something starts bubbling up from deep in my chest. At first, I think it might be another wave of humiliation, but then I realize what it actually is: laughter. Dark, bitter laughter that tastes like revenge served at room temperature. Because here's the thing that's becoming crystal clear as I review my meticulous record keeping. I haven't been Clara's husband for the past 2 years. I've been her bank. A walking, talking ATM with a wedding ring and a joint checking account. Every dinner party where she introduced me as my husband, the tech entrepreneur, she was really saying, my financier who doesn't understand law. Every time she asked my opinion on hiring decisions or office locations, she was just being polite while spending my money. Every passionate speech about building something meaningful and lasting, she was talking about building it on my dime while planning to cut me out of the picture. I pull out my laptop and start cross-referencing the documents with my bank statements. The pattern is so obvious now that I can't believe I missed it. Every major expense for the firm coincided with Clara working late nights, taking client dinners that always seemed to include Victor, and coming home with that glow that I stupidly thought was professional satisfaction. $20 million. That's what the grand total comes to when you add up every check, every wire transfer, every credit card payment I've made to support Hale and Winters LLP. $20 million to fund my wife's affair and finance my own public humiliation. But here's where Clara and Victor made their fatal mistake. They assumed I was just another rich guy who got successful by luck and stayed successful by throwing money at problems. They thought I was the kind of Mark who signs papers without reading them and trusts people because it's easier than being suspicious. They clearly never did their homework on how Marcus Hale actually operates. Every single one of these transactions was structured as a business investment, not a marital gift. Every contract includes performance clauses, accountability measures, and most importantly, exit strategies. Clara never read the fine print because she was too busy planning her grand debut as New York's hottest new legal power couple. I closed the binder and reached for the next one. Corporate structure and silent partner agreements. This is where things get really interesting. See, when you're putting $20 million into a startup law firm, even one run by your loving wife, you don't just write checks and hope for the best. You create legal structures that protect your investment. You establish yourself as a silent partner with very specific rights and responsibilities. Rights like the ability to freeze corporate accounts if fiscal responsibility is questioned. Rights like mandatory disclosure of all major expenditures. Rights like unilateral withdrawal of invested capital under breach of fiduciary duty clauses. The beauty of it all is that Clara signed every single one of these agreements herself. She was so eager to get her hands on my money that she barely glanced at the corporate documents. She probably assumed they were just legal boilerplate, the kind of paperwork you sign when your husband is being overly cautious about protecting his assets. I lean back in my chair and take another sip of that Macallan, savoring both the whiskey and the irony. At this very moment, Clara and Victor are probably still at the Hilton, basking in the afterglow of their power move, accepting congratulations from all those legal eagles who witnessed my public takedown. They think they've won. They think Marcus Hale just got played by the two smartest people in the room. They're probably already planning how to spend my $20 million, maybe even joking about how easy it was to separate a fool from his money. What they don't realize is that Marcus Hale doesn't get played. He plays the game better than everyone else. And sometimes that means letting people think they're winning right up until the moment they realize they've been checkmated. I close the safe and pour myself another drink. Tomorrow, the real education begins. Tonight, I'm just a guy in an expensive apartment, surrounded by evidence of the biggest mistake his wife ever made. But hey, we all make mistakes. The trick is making sure yours aren't fatal. You know what separates successful people from everyone else? Timing. Not just knowing what to do, but knowing exactly when to do it. And as I'm sitting in my study at 2:47 a.m., nursing my third glass of Macallan and staring at my laptop screen, I realize that my timing has never been better. The city outside my windows is mostly asleep, but I'm wide awake with the kind of clarity that only comes from having your world turned upside down and finally seeing it right side up. Clara and Victor are probably passed out in some five-star hotel suite right now, drunk on champagne and their own perceived brilliance. They think they've pulled off the heist of the century, stealing $20 million and a law firm from Marcus Hale while making him look like a fool in front of half of New York's legal establishment. What they don't know is that Marcus Hale doesn't sleep when there's work to be done. And tonight, there's definitely work to be done. I crack my knuckles and open up my laptop, the screen's blue glow reflecting off the empty whiskey glass beside me. First stop, the firm's online banking portal. Clara probably assumes I don't have access anymore, maybe even changed the passwords in some amateur attempt at digital security. She always was too trusting, too willing to believe that people are exactly what they appear to be on the surface. But here's the thing about being the guy who bankrolled the entire operation. You make sure you always have a way in. Those credentials I memorized when we first set up the corporate accounts? Still working perfectly. The backup email address tied to password recovery? That's my personal Gmail account, not Clara's. The security questions? All answered with information only I would know. I'm in the system within 30 seconds, and what I see makes me smile for the first time since that disaster at the Hilton. The account balance shows exactly what I expected. $847,000 in operating capital, sitting pretty in the main business checking account. There's also the money market account with another $1.2 million in reserve funds, and the expense account Victor's been using to fund his and Clara's business dinners at the city's most expensive restaurants. This is going to be fun. I start with the smallest moves first, the kind of financial adjustments that won't trigger any immediate red flags, but will definitely cause some interesting conversations come Monday morning. The automatic payment system that handles the firm's monthly expenses, office lease, utilities, cleaning service, coffee suppliers, gets a little adjustment. Not canceled, mind you, just temporarily suspended due to account verification requirements. Next up, the vendor payments. That fancy catering company that provided tonight's champagne fountain and caviar service? Their invoice payment just got frozen pending financial review. The The florist who created those elaborate centerpieces? Same deal. The sound system rental, the photographer, the valet service. Every single vendor who contributed to my public humiliation just got moved to payment pending status. But I'm just getting warmed up. The real masterpiece is the payroll system. All those hotshot lawyers Clara and Victor poached from competing firms, the ones with their signing bonuses and six-figure salaries and attitudes that could cut glass, their direct deposit information just encountered a small technical glitch that will require manual resolution. Nothing permanent, you understand. Just a temporary hiccup that might make their mortgage payments a little more interesting this month. I lean back in my chair and take another sip of whiskey, savoring the smooth burn as much as the elegant simplicity of what I'm doing. This isn't some dramatic corporate raid with hostile takeovers and screaming board meetings. This is surgical precision, the kind of quiet destruction that happens in spreadsheets and database queries while the targets sleep peacefully in their beds. But the real coup de grace is still coming. I navigate to the investment management section of the portal, where the crown jewel of my financial architecture sits waiting. My silent partner withdrawal clause. It's buried in subsection 7.3 of the corporate partnership agreement, the part that Clara's lawyer probably skimmed over because it looked like standard boilerplate language. What it actually says, in very precise legal terminology, is that any partner who contributed more than 75% of the firm's initial capitalization has the right to immediate asset recovery in the event of material breach of fiduciary responsibility or dissolution of partnership confidence. $20 million in, Clara's public divorce announcement at the firm's launch party, Victor's smirk as he watched me get handed those papers. I'd say that qualifies as material breach of just about everything. I click through the withdrawal process, each screen asking me to confirm that yes, I really want to do this, and yes, I understand the consequences, and yes, I'm absolutely certain. The system is designed to make you think twice, to give you multiple opportunities to back down from what it knows is going to be a financial nuclear option. But Marcus Hale doesn't back down. Not when he's been played. Not when he's been humiliated. And definitely not when he's got 20 million reasons to make his point crystal clear. The final screen is beautiful in its simplicity. Withdrawal request submitted. Funds will be transferred within 24 to 48 business hours, pending final documentation review. Below that, a number that makes my heart skip a beat, $20 million. $20 million, about to disappear from Hale and Winters LLP's accounts like morning mist in the summer sun. I hit submit and lean back to watch the digital wheels start turning. Somewhere in the depths of the banking system's servers, electronic signals are already starting to flow, beginning the process that will transform Clara's dream firm from a powerhouse startup into a very expensive pile of legal documents. The beauty of it all is the timing. It's Saturday night, or Sunday morning, technically. The banks won't start processing anything until Monday, which means Clara and Victor have roughly 40 hours to enjoy their victory before they discover what Marcus Hale's version of a divorce settlement actually looks like. I pour myself one more glass of that Macallan and walk over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city spreads out below me like a circuit board, all glittering lights and hidden connections. Somewhere out there, Clara is probably sleeping the sleep of the victorious, dreaming about her new life as New York's hottest legal celebrity. What she doesn't know yet is that you can't build a legal empire on someone else's money and then expect them to just walk away when you're done with them. You can't humiliate Marcus Hale in front of half the city's power brokers and assume there won't be consequences. They wanted a scene at that party, some dramatic breakdown they could gossip about over their country club brunches. What they're getting instead is something much more devastating. A silent storm that's going to tear through their perfect little world like a Category 5 hurricane. The best part? They'll never see it coming until it's already too late. I raise my glass to the sleeping city and smile. Monday morning is going to be very, very interesting. Monday morning hits New York City like a freight train, and I'm sitting in my kitchen sipping Colombian coffee that costs more per pound than most people spend on groceries, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It's shaping up to be a beautiful day, the kind that makes you grateful to be alive and absolutely thrilled to be Marcus Hale. My phone has been buzzing since about 6:30 a.m., lighting up like a Christmas tree with incoming calls, texts, and voicemails. The caller ID reads like a who's who of people who suddenly need to talk to me very, very urgently. Clara, 47 missed calls and counting. Victor Cross, 12 calls, each one probably more desperate than the last. And a parade of board members, investors, and vendors whose names I recognize from the very expensive party they threw on Saturday night. I ignore every single one of them. There's something deeply satisfying about having information that other people desperately need while maintaining complete radio silence. It's like being the only person with an umbrella in a thunderstorm. You can choose who stays dry and who gets soaked to the bone. My doorman's voice crackles through the intercom at exactly 10 a.m., right on schedule. Mr. Hale, sir. There's a young lady here from the law firm. Says it's urgent. Name's Sophie something. Sophie Lang. Clara's assistant, fresh out of college and probably making 30 grand a year to fetch coffee and manage calendars for people who think they're changing the world. Poor kid probably has no idea she's about to become a messenger in the most expensive game of chess New York has seen all year. Send her up, Frank, I tell the intercom, then settle back into my leather chair with my coffee mug and the morning edition of the Wall Street Journal. Nothing quite like reading about other people's financial disasters while orchestrating your own masterpiece. The knock on my door comes exactly 3 minutes later. Soft, hesitant, the kind of knock that says, please don't shoot the messenger. I take my time answering, letting her stew in the hallway for a moment while I finish the article I'm reading about market volatility in emerging tech sectors. When I finally open the door, Sophie Lang looks like she's been through a blender set on Corporate Nightmare. Her usually perfect blonde hair is pulled back in a messy bun. Her makeup is smudged like she's been crying or rubbing her eyes, and she's clutching a manila folder against her chest like it's a life preserver. Mr. Hale, she says, and her voice actually cracks a little. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is irregular. Sophie, right. I step aside and gesture for her to come in. Clara's assistant? Coffee. You look like you could use it. She shakes her head quickly, too wound up to sit still. I can't stay long. The firm there's a situation. A big situation. I pour myself a fresh cup and lean against the kitchen counter, watching her with the kind of mild interest you'd show to a particularly entertaining street performer. Oh, what kind of situation? Everything's collapsing. The words tumble out of her like water through a broken dam. The payroll system crashed this morning. Nobody got paid. The vendors are calling nonstop saying their payments were rejected. The catering company is threatening to sue over the party expenses. Even the coffee service got cut off. Do you know how lawyers function without coffee, Mr. Hale? I take a slow sip from my mug and make a thoughtful noise. Sounds complicated. The investors are furious, she continues, pacing back and forth in my entryway like a caged animal. Judge Winters has been calling every hour demanding explanations. Victor locked himself in his office and won't come out. And Clara. She stops pacing and looks at me with eyes that are definitely on the verge of tears. Clara says it's all just a computer glitch. Some kind of banking error that will be resolved by end of business today. And what do you think, Sophie? She bites her lower lip, clearly wrestling with whether to speak her mind to the man who just got publicly divorced by her boss. I think, she says carefully, that computer glitches don't usually involve $20 million disappearing from corporate accounts. Smart girl. Smarter than her boss, anyway. I'm not a financial expert, I tell her, setting down my coffee mug and walking over to my desk. But that does sound like more than a glitch. I pull open the top drawer and retrieve a cream-colored envelope, the kind of expensive stationery that screams serious business without having to say a word. Inside are 3 sheets of legal paper covered in my lawyer's precise handwriting. Terms and conditions that Clara is going to absolutely hate, but will have no choice but to consider. I need you to deliver this to Clara, I say, handing Sophie the envelope. Directly to her. Don't give it to Victor, don't leave it with the receptionist, don't put it in her inbox. Hand it to Clara personally and tell her she has exactly 24 hours to respond. Sophie takes the envelope like it might explode in her hands. What's in it? A way out of this mess, I say simply. The only way out, actually. Her eyes search my face, probably looking for some hint of mercy or compassion or basic human decency. What she finds instead is the cold, calculating stare of a man who's done playing games. Mr. Hale, she says quietly, is this about the divorce? Because if it is, maybe we could. Sophie, I interrupt her gently but firmly. This isn't about the divorce. This is about business. $20 million worth of business that your bosses seem to have forgotten belongs to someone. She nods slowly, finally understanding that she's not just delivering a message. She's carrying the terms of surrender from the winning side to the losing side. 24 hours, I repeat. Not a minute more. And Sophie? Make sure Clara understands that this is the only offer she's going to get. The next conversation won't be nearly as pleasant. After she leaves, I walk back to my kitchen window and look out at the city below. Somewhere in a glass tower on Madison Avenue, Clara is probably having the worst Monday of her professional life. The phone calls, the panicked meetings, the growing realization that her dream firm is turning into a nightmare faster than she can damage control. I pour myself another cup of coffee and check my phone. 53 missed calls now, plus a text message from Victor that just says, "Call me now" in all caps. I delete the text without reading it twice and turn my phone to silent mode. The beautiful thing about being Marcus Hale is that when you hold all the cards, you get to decide when the game ends. And this game? It's just getting started. 24 hours, Clara. The clock is ticking. Friday morning arrives with all the subtlety of a demolition crew, and I'm standing in front of my bathroom mirror at 7:30 a.m., adjusting a tie that costs more than most people's rent, while mentally preparing for what's about to be the most satisfying business meeting of my entire career. Today's ensemble is what I like to call corporate executioner chic. Charcoal Tom Ford suit that fits like it was sewn directly onto my body, Italian leather shoes that could probably finance a small car, and a smile that would make a shark jealous. When you're about to walk into a room full of lawyers who think they've been playing chess while you've been playing 4D chess, presentation matters. The ride to Hale and Winters LLP takes exactly 14 minutes in Manhattan traffic, which gives me just enough time to review my notes and savor the irony of walking into a building whose lease I personally guarantee. The lobby looks the same as it did when Clara first showed me the space 2 years ago, all marble and brass and aspirational grandeur designed to intimidate clients into paying premium rates. What's different is the energy. Instead of the confident buzz of legal eagles circling their prey, there's a nervous tension in the air that you could cut with a subpoena. The receptionist, a young woman whose name I've never bothered to learn, looks up at me with eyes wide enough to suggest she knows exactly why I'm here. "Mr. Hale," she stammers. They're waiting for you in the conference room." Of course they are. When Marcus Hale schedules a 9 a.m. meeting, smart people show up early and nervous people show up earlier. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gives me 30 seconds to appreciate the view of Manhattan spreading out below like a game board I'm about to rearrange. When the doors open, I can hear voices through the conference room's glass walls, urgent whispers, and what sounds like someone practicing damage control talking points. I push through the mahogany doors at exactly 9:00 a.m. because punctuality is just another form of power, and survey the carnage that used to be Clara's dream team. The conference room that once hosted champagne toasts and victory celebrations now looks like a war room staffed by people who've already lost the war. Elaine Porter, the senior counsel who Clara poached from a white shoe firm with promises of partnership and prestige, is sitting at the far end of the table staring at her coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions she's afraid to ask. 2 junior associates, whose names I've never bothered to learn, are huddled together near the window, probably calculating how quickly they can update their LinkedIn profiles and start sending out resumes. The firm's accountant, a nervous little man who always looks like he's apologizing for existing, has spreadsheets spread out in front of him like tea leaves he's trying to read for signs of financial salvation. And then there's Clara, sitting at the head of the table in the same chair where she used to hold court during partners' meetings, looking like she hasn't slept since our conversation 3 nights ago. Her usually perfect appearance has been replaced by the kind of frazzled desperation that comes from trying to hold together something that's determined to fall apart. But the most telling detail in the entire room is the empty chair where Victor Cross should be sitting. "Where's your partner?" I ask, settling into the seat directly across from Clara with the kind of casual confidence that says I belong here more than anyone else in the room. "Victor is indisposed," Clara says carefully. "He's been dealing with some personal issues since Monday." Personal issues. That's a polite way of saying Nervous breakdown brought on by the sudden realization that he's been screwing around with someone else's wife while spending someone else's money. Word around the legal community is that Victor hasn't left his apartment since Tuesday, surviving on Chinese takeout and what I imagine is a steady diet of panic attacks. Well, I say, opening my briefcase and pulling out a folder thick enough to choke a horse. I suppose we'll have to proceed without him. I spread the documents across the mahogany table like a dealer shuffling cards, each page representing another nail in the coffin of Clara's legal empire. Partnership dissolution agreements, asset recovery forms, employment termination notices, and the piece de resistance, a restructuring proposal that would make Gordon Gekko weep with appreciation. As you all know, I begin, addressing the room with the kind of calm authority that comes from holding all the cards. Hale & Winters LLP is currently experiencing what we might charitably call a cash flow problem. Elaine Porter finally looks up from her coffee cup. Mr. Hale, if this is about the withdrawal of your investment, I'm sure we can work out some kind of payment plan. This isn't about payment plans, Elaine. This is about fundamental restructuring. I slide a copy of my terms across the table to each person in the room. These are my conditions for continued operation of this firm. The silence that follows is the kind you get in emergency rooms right before doctors deliver bad news. Everyone's reading, but nobody's speaking, probably because they're all trying to process the magnitude of what they're looking at. You want Clara to resign as managing partner? Elaine's voice comes out as barely more than a whisper. I want Clara to resign from any operational role in this firm. I correct. She can maintain a position as counsel, but she will have no decision-making authority, no client contact, and no access to firm finances. And Victor? Asks one of the junior associates. Victor Cross is terminated immediately, with no severance, no references, and a non-compete clause that will keep him from practicing law in New York for the next 5 years. Clara finally speaks up, her voice hollow. Marcus, you're destroying everything we built. Everything I built. I correct her gently. While you were playing law firm, I was actually running a business. The business that kept this place afloat for 2 years while you and Victor were playing house with my money. I stand up and walk to the window, looking out at the city that Clara once thought she was going to conquer. My $20 million will be repaid in structured installments over the next 10 years, with interest. I will assume 2 permanent board seats, including the position of Financial Oversight Director with veto power over any expenditure exceeding $10,000. That's essentially a hostile takeover, Elaine stammers. No, I turn back to face the room, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I let them see exactly how much I've enjoyed watching their little empire crumble. A hostile takeover is when someone steals your company. This is what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you and discover it has very sharp teeth. Clara's hands are shaking as she picks up the pen I've placed in front of her. If I sign this, I'll be nothing more than an employee in my own firm. Your firm? I walk back to the table and lean down so that my face is level with hers. Clara, this stopped being your firm the moment you decided to serve me divorce papers at a party I paid for. What you're looking at now is the Marcus Hale version of a settlement offer. She stares at the signature line for what feels like an eternity, probably running through all the alternatives in her mind. Fight me in court with lawyers she can't afford? Try to start over somewhere else with a reputation that's been nuked from orbit? Declare bankruptcy and watch 20 years of legal career go down the drain? When she finally signs her name, the pen scratches across the paper like fingernails on a chalkboard. One by one, the other partners sign their copies, each signature another step in what history will probably remember as the most efficient corporate coup in Manhattan legal history. As I'm packing up my briefcase, Elaine Porter clears her throat. Mr. Hale, what happens to the rest of us? You keep your jobs, I say simply. You keep your salaries. You keep your benefits. The only thing that changes is that this firm will now be run by someone who actually knows how to run a business. I'm almost to the door when Clara's voice stops me. Marcus, she says, her voice barely audible. Was this always the plan? Even from the beginning? I turn back and look at her one last time. This woman I was married to for 8 years, who I trusted with my money and my heart, who I watched build her dreams on the foundation of my bank account before she decided she didn't need the foundation anymore. No, Clara, I tell her honestly. The plan was to love you and support your dreams and grow old together. But plans change when people do stupid things. I closed the door behind me with a soft click, leaving behind the wreckage of Clara's empire and the birth of something entirely new. Outside on the street, I pull out my phone and dial my accountant. Jameson? It's Marcus. Yes, it went exactly as planned. Start the paperwork for the restructuring. And Jameson? Make sure the new letterhead reads, Hale Legal Partners. I think it has a nice ring to it. 2 weeks after I basically nuked my wife's legal empire from orbit, I find myself standing in front of a converted townhouse in Brooklyn that looks like it's been through more battles than a Civil War battlefield. The paint is peeling, the front steps are cracked, and there's a fire escape that probably violates about 17 building codes. But something about this place feels more real than all the marble and mahogany I've been dealing with lately. This is where the magic happens, apparently. Phoenix Legal Collective, a name that would make corporate lawyers laugh until they cried, but somehow fits perfectly with the scrappy energy radiating from this building like heat from a furnace. I'm here because my lawyer, Patricia Wells, mentioned something about opportunities in emerging legal markets during our post-coup celebration dinner last week. What she actually meant was, there's this crazy young lawyer in Brooklyn who's making the big firms nervous, and maybe you should check her out before someone else does. The reception area looks like it was decorated by someone who shopped exclusively at garage sales and IKEA's bargain bin. Mismatched chairs, a coffee table that's probably older than most of the staff, and walls covered with newspaper clippings about cases they've won against corporations that could buy and sell this entire building without blinking. But here's the thing about Marcus Hale. I didn't get where I am by judging books by their covers. Some of the most profitable investments I've ever made started in places that looked like they were one health inspection away from being condemned. Mr. Hale, a voice calls from across the room, and I turn to see a woman who's probably young enough to be carded at restaurants, but carries herself with the kind of confidence that usually takes decades to develop. I'm Lydia Torres. Thank you for coming. Lydia Torres looks exactly like what you'd expect from someone running a legal collective in Brooklyn. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that says, I don't have time for fancy styling. Jeans that have probably seen more courtrooms than some lawyers see in their entire careers, and eyes that burn with the kind of intensity you usually only find in people who've got something to prove to the world. Miss Torres, I shake her hand, noting the firm grip that doesn't try to overcompensate, but doesn't apologize for existing either. Interesting operation you've got here. She laughs, and it's the kind of genuine sound that I haven't heard in legal circles for longer than I care to admit. That's one way to put it. Come on, let me show you around before you decide whether we're brilliant visionaries or completely insane. The tour that follows is like stepping into an alternate universe where lawyers actually give a damn about something other than billable hours and partnership tracks. The office space is cramped and chaotic, with case files stacked on every available surface and whiteboards covered in strategy notes that look like they were written by someone planning a military campaign. This is our war room, Lydia says, gesturing to a conference room that's about the size of Clara's old office closet. We handle about 40 cases at any given time. Wrongful evictions, immigration rights, class action suits against landlords who think heat is optional in January. I pick up a case file from the table, Martinez versus Blackstone Property Management. A family of 5 getting evicted from their apartment because their toddler's crying supposedly violated the quiet enjoyment clause in their lease. The kind of case that big firms would settle quietly for nuisance value. Except these people are fighting it all the way to appeals court. What's your success rate? I ask, genuinely curious. Depends how you measure success, Lydia replies, leading me to another room where 3 lawyers who look like they're barely old enough to vote are huddled around a computer screen. If you mean, how often do we get our clients exactly what they're asking for? It's about 60%. If you mean, how often do we keep people from getting completely screwed over by corporations with unlimited legal budgets? It's closer to 90. We stop in front of a bulletin board covered with thank you letters, newspaper clippings, and what looks like a hand-drawn picture from a kid whose family probably didn't get evicted because of the work these people do. It's the kind of wall decoration you'd never see at Hale Legal Partners, where success is measured in billable hours and partnership distributions. Mr. Hale, Lydia says, and for the first time since I arrived, her voice gets serious. I'm going to be straight with you. We're broke. Not cash flow problems broke, or waiting for receivables broke. We're choosing between office rent and employee health insurance broke. I appreciate the honesty. In my experience, people who are willing to admit they're drowning are usually the ones worth throwing a life preserver to. How broke? I ask. We've got about 6 weeks of operating capital left, assuming nobody gets sick and the heating system doesn't completely die before spring. Our biggest corporate case just settled for a fraction of what we were hoping for, and the city cut funding for legal aid programs by 30%. She leads me to her office, which is basically a closet with a window and enough legal books to stock a small library. The desk is covered with financial statements that paint a picture of an organization that's been running on passion and coffee for longer than anyone should have to. We could take corporate clients, she continues, settling into a chair that looks like it came from a 1970s yard sale. Charge premium rates for routine contract work, maybe do some regulatory compliance for tech startups. But that's not why we got into law. Why did you get into law? I ask, because something tells me the answer is going to be refreshingly different from to make partner by 30 and buy a house in the Hamptons. Because the system is rigged, she says simply. Because corporate lawyers make more in a month than most people make in a year, while families get evicted because they can't afford legal representation. Because immigration courts have a 97% conviction rate when people represent themselves, but a 60% acquittal rate when they have competent counsel. She pulls out a folder and spreads some papers across her desk. We're not trying to get rich, Mr. Hale. We're trying to level the playing field just enough so that having money isn't the only thing that determines whether you get justice. I look at the financial projections, the case files, the thank you letters, and something clicks into place that I wasn't expecting. This isn't just another investment opportunity or another way to diversify my portfolio. This is the anti-Clara. This is what Clara's firm could have been if she'd actually cared about practicing law instead of playing lawyer for the cameras. What would you do with $10 million? I ask. Lydia's eyes widen like I just asked her what she'd do if aliens landed on the courthouse steps. 10 million? Are you serious? Dead serious. 10 million in seed funding, in exchange for 40% equity and a board seat. What would you build? She doesn't hesitate, which tells me she's been thinking about this conversation long before I walk through her door. Expand to all 5 boroughs. Hire 20 more attorneys. Create a training program for law students who want to do public interest work but can't afford to take unpaid internships. Set up a legal clinic in every neighborhood where people can get real advice instead of just forms to fill out. And change the game. Make it so that having a corporate legal team doesn't automatically mean you win. Level the playing field so that justice isn't just for people who can afford it. I pull out my checkbook. Yes, I still carry an actual checkbook because some things are too important for electronic transfers, and write out a number that makes Lydia's eyes fill with tears. $10 million. Not a loan with complicated terms and performance clauses. Not an investment with exit strategies and profit-sharing agreements. Just seed money for someone who wants to fight the good fight and actually has the balls to do it. Mr. Hale, she says, staring at the check like it might disappear if she blinks. You've just saved us. You've saved everything we're trying to build here. No, I tell her, standing up and shaking her hand again. You've saved me. I've been so busy playing corporate games that I forgot what it feels like to invest in something that actually matters. As I'm walking back to my car, I pull out my phone and dial Patricia Wells. Patricia? It's Marcus. Remember that emerging legal market opportunity you mentioned? Yeah, I just wrote them a check for $10 million. And Patricia, this isn't about revenge anymore. This is about building something real. For the first time since this whole mess started, I'm not thinking about Clara or Victor or the smoking ruins of Hale and Winters. I'm thinking about what comes next, and it feels a hell of a lot better than looking backward. 3 weeks after I basically adopted a scrappy legal collective in Brooklyn like some kind of philanthropic sugar daddy, Clara calls me with a proposal that's about as appealing as a root canal performed by a drunk dentist. She wants to meet for coffee to discuss our public narrative, which is PR speak for help me figure out how to spin this disaster so I don't look like a complete idiot. The location she picks is Cafe Orpheus, one of those aggressively neutral Upper West Side spots where divorced couples go to hash out custody agreements and failed business partners meet to divide up what's left of their dreams. It's the kind of place that serves $15 avocado toast and has enough ambient noise to cover heated conversations without making them sound like Jerry Springer episodes. I arrive exactly on time because punctuality is just another form of psychological warfare, and find Clara already sitting at a corner table with her laptop open and what looks like a legal pad covered in talking points. She's wearing a navy blue business suit that screams professional competence and makeup that's probably designed to hide the fact that she hasn't been sleeping well since her empire collapsed. "Marcus," she says as I sit down, her voice carrying that careful modulation lawyers use when they're trying to sound reasonable while asking for unreasonable things. "Thank you for coming. I know this is complicated." I order black coffee from a waitress who looks young enough to be my daughter and settle back in my chair with the kind of relaxed confidence that comes from holding all the cards in a game where your opponent is still trying to figure out what game they're playing. "So," I say, stirring cream into my coffee with the deliberate slowness of someone who has nowhere else to be and all the time in the world. "What's this about, Clara?" She slides her laptop across the table like she's presenting evidence in a murder trial. On the screen is a draft press release that's been formatted with all the professional polish of a Fortune 500 company's damage control statement. The headline reads, "Hale Legal Partners announces leadership transition." I start reading, and with every sentence, my appreciation for the creative use of the English language grows exponentially. According to this masterpiece of corporate fiction, Clara is stepping back from operational duties to focus on strategic client relationships. My acquisition of controlling interest in the firm is described as a planned transition to optimize operational efficiency. The complete absence of Victor Cross from any mention in the document is apparently because he's pursuing new opportunities in the private sector. It's like reading a fairy tale written by someone who learned creative writing from SEC filing documents. "This is interesting," I say after finishing the entire thing, which takes about 3 minutes because it's mostly buzzwords strung together with corporate nonsense. "Very creative." Clara leans forward with the kind of hopeful expression that suggests she actually thinks I might be buying what she's selling. "I worked with our communications consultant to craft something that protects everyone's reputation while explaining the transition in terms that the legal community can understand." "Our communications consultant," I repeat slowly. "You mean the same communications consultant who charged my company $20,000 to plan a launch party where you publicly divorced me?" Her face flushes slightly, but she pushes forward like a lawyer who's already committed to a bad argument. "Marcus, we both have reputations to protect. This statement allows us to move forward without unnecessary damage to either of our professional standing." I close the laptop and slide it back across the table. "Clara, this reads like something a politician would release after getting caught embezzling campaign funds. It's 90% bullshit wrapped in 10% fancy vocabulary. It's a professional statement that..." "It's a lie." I interrupt her gently but firmly. Every single sentence in that document is designed to hide the truth instead of explaining it. "You want to protect our reputations? Let's start by telling people what actually happened." She stares at me like I just suggested we take out a full-page ad in the New York Times admitting to war crimes. "You want me to tell the truth? The actual truth?" Crazy concept, I know. But yes, I want you to tell the truth. For the next 2 hours, we sit in that cafe rewriting Clara's fairy tale into something that resembles actual journalism. It's like performing surgery on a piece of creative writing, cutting away all the corporate speak and media training until what's left is raw, honest, and probably more devastating than anything I could have written myself. The first draft Clara produces is still mostly garbage, but it's garbage that's moving in the right direction. Instead of stepping back from operational duties, she writes, resigning from leadership positions. Instead of planned transition, she admits to financial restructuring following the withdrawal of major investment. But it's still not enough. "Try again," I tell her, handing back her laptop after deleting half of what she's written. "This time, pretend you're explaining it to your father. Judge Winters doesn't do corporate speak, Clara. He does facts." The mention of her father hits like a slap across the face. Judge Robert Winters is old-school judiciary, the kind of man who believes that words should mean what they say and say what they mean. He's also the kind of father who raised his daughter to believe that integrity matters more than appearances, which makes Clara's current situation especially painful. She starts typing again, and this time the words that come out are sharper, cleaner, more honest. Instead of hiding behind passive voice and corporate euphemisms, she starts taking responsibility for decisions that led to consequences. Marcus Hale provided the financial foundation that made Hale and Winters LLP possible, she writes. My personal choices jeopardized that investment and damaged the professional relationship that the firm was built on. It's getting better, but it's still not the whole truth. What about Victor? I ask. She stops typing and stares at the screen for a long moment. What about him? Are you going to mention that you were having an affair with your business partner while using your husband's money to fund both your firm and your relationship? Or are we going to pretend that's not relevant to the story? The question hangs in the air between us like smoke from a gun barrel. Clara's hands hover over the keyboard, probably running through all the different ways she could phrase this particular truth without completely destroying what's left of her professional reputation. I made personal choices that compromised my professional judgment, she finally types. Those choices led to decisions that were unfair to my investors and damaging to the firm's financial stability. It's still corporate speak, but it's corporate speak that acknowledges reality instead of trying to pretend it never happened. We spend another hour refining the language, cutting away the last bits of spin and public relations nonsense until what's left is something that might actually qualify as honest. By the time we're finished, Clara's statement reads like it was written by someone who understands the difference between accepting responsibility and managing public perception. The final version includes an acknowledgement that I funded the firm's entire operation, an admission that her personal decisions led to the firm's financial crisis, and a clear statement that she's stepping down from all leadership roles to allow for proper restructuring under new management. This is going to destroy my reputation, she says, reading through the final draft one more time. Your reputation was destroyed the moment you decided to publicly humiliate the man who bankrolled your entire operation, I tell her. This is just acknowledging what everyone already knows. She stares at the screen for another long moment, probably weighing the cost of honesty against the price of continued deception. Then, without any fanfare or dramatic speeches, she hits schedule and sets the statement to go live on the firm's website and social media accounts tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. There, she says, closing the laptop with a finality that sounds like a coffin lid slamming shut. The truth as requested. The truth as required. I correct her. This should have been your first instinct, not your last resort. As I'm getting ready to leave, Clara reaches across the table and touches my hand for just a moment. Marcus, for what it's worth, I never wanted it to end like this. I know, I tell her honestly. But wanting something and working for it are two very different things. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. I wanted a wife who understood that marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a business transaction. Outside the cafe, I pull out my phone and call Patricia Wells. Patricia? It's Marcus. Clara's releasing a statement tomorrow morning. Yes, it's honest. No, she's not going to like the reaction. And Patricia? Make sure our media people are ready to field calls. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I can already hear the phones ringing at law firms across Manhattan as the Legal Gossip Network processes the news that Clara Winters Hale just admitted to imploding her own firm through spectacular professional misconduct. Tomorrow morning, the truth finally gets to see daylight. And after months of living in Clara's carefully constructed fantasy, that feels like a victory all by itself. You know what's funny about the truth? It spreads faster than gossip and hits harder than a freight train carrying lawsuits. Clara's statement goes live at exactly 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and by 9:15, my phone is buzzing like an angry hornet's nest with calls from reporters, lawyers, and probably half the legal establishment in Manhattan who suddenly want to know everything about Marcus Hale. I'm sitting in my apartment, nursing my second cup of Colombian coffee and watching the sunrise paint Central Park in shades of gold and possibility when the first call comes in. It's from Legal Times, then Above the Law, then something called Manhattan Law Weekly that I'm pretty sure didn't exist yesterday, but apparently has very strong opinions about corporate restructuring in boutique firms. The best part? I don't answer a single one of them. Instead, I pour myself another cup of coffee and settle in to watch the digital wildfire spread across social media like spilled gasoline meeting a lit cigarette. LinkedIn explodes with hot takes from lawyers who want everyone to know they saw this coming all along. Twitter becomes a battlefield between people who think Clara got what she deserved and people who think I'm some kind of corporate monster for pulling my own money out of a business run by people who betrayed me. By noon, the story has made it to the front page of the New York Law Journal with a headline that reads, "Power Couple's Public Divorce Exposes Law Firm Financial Crisis." The article includes quotes from sources close to the situation who apparently have very detailed knowledge of my personal finances and very strong opinions about my character. But here's the thing about being Marcus Hale. When you've already won the war, watching people argue about the battle tactics is just entertainment. The real fun starts around 2 p.m. when my email inbox begins filling up with opportunities that would have seemed impossible just 6 months ago. Columbia Law School wants me to guest lecture on entrepreneurial finance in legal startups. The New York State Bar Association is asking if I'd be interested in serving on their ethics committee, which is either ironic or perfectly appropriate, depending on your perspective. 3 different nonprofit organizations want to discuss potential partnerships, and someone from the mayor's office is asking if I'd consider joining an advisory board on small business development. It's like watching your reputation get rebuilt in real time, except this time it's being built on a foundation of honesty instead of carefully managed public relations. The most interesting call comes from Dr. Eleanor Hartwell at NYU's Business School, who wants to know if I'd be willing to participate in a case study about financial accountability in professional services partnerships. Apparently, my systematic dismantling of Clara's empire is being taught as an example of how to protect investment interests when personal relationships go sideways. I'm famous, but for all the right reasons this time. Around 4 p.m., I decide to escape the chaos and take a walk through Central Park. It's one of those perfect October afternoons when the leaves are just starting to turn and the air has that crisp quality that makes you grateful to be alive in New York City. I'm walking past the Shakespeare Garden, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether to grab dinner at that Italian place I like, when my phone buzzes with a text from Patricia Wells. Victor Cross just posted on LinkedIn. You should probably see this. I find a bench and pull up Victor's profile, which now features a lengthy post that reads like a suicide note written by someone who learned creative writing from corporate legal documents. He's apparently taking time to reassess career priorities and exploring opportunities outside the traditional legal framework. It's the kind of language people use when they're unemployed but too proud to admit it. The comments section is a bloodbath of former colleagues offering hollow sympathy while probably updating their contact lists to remove his information. It's professional death by 1,000 cuts, and I'd almost feel sorry for him if he hadn't spent 2 years screwing my wife while spending my money. By the time I get home, there are 17 voicemails waiting for me, including one from Judge Robert Winters that simply says, "Marcus, call me when you get a chance. We should talk." Clara's father has always been a straight shooter, the kind of man who doesn't waste words or time on pleasantries when there's serious business to discuss. I call him back immediately, because ignoring Judge Winters is the kind of mistake that follows you around for the rest of your life. "Marcus," he answers on the first ring. I read Clara's statement. I also read the coverage in the legal press. "Are you doing okay?" It's such a simple question, but coming from him, it carries the weight of genuine concern. Judge Winters watched his daughter destroy her marriage and her career, and somehow he's asking if I'm okay. "I'm better than I've been in years, Judge," I tell him honestly. "Thank you for asking." "Good. That's good." There's a pause, and I can hear him choosing his words carefully. "Marcus, I want you to know that what Clara did, the way she handled this situation, that's not how I raised her. That's not the kind of person I thought she was. People change, Judge. Sometimes they show you who they really were all along. Maybe so, but I want you to know that you handled this with more class than most men would have shown. You could have destroyed her completely, and you didn't." After I hang up, I realize that Judge Winters is right. I could have destroyed Clara completely. I could have made sure she never practiced law again. Could have turned her into a cautionary tale that law students study for decades. Instead, I gave her a chance to rebuild, albeit on a much smaller scale, and with a much clearer understanding of how the world actually works. Maybe that makes me a better man than I thought I was. Or maybe it just makes me someone who's learned the difference between justice and revenge. That evening, I'm getting ready for dinner when my doorman calls up to announce that I have a visitor. Dr. Camille Rhodes from Columbia Law School, sir. Says she has an appointment? I don't remember scheduling any appointments, but something about the name sounds familiar. It takes me a moment to place it. She's the ethics professor who was quoted in one of the articles about Clara's statement, talking about fiduciary responsibility in professional partnerships. Dr. Camille Rhodes turns out to be a woman in her early 40s with the kind of sharp intelligence that comes through in everything from her handshake to the way she looks around my apartment like she's cataloging details for future reference. She's wearing jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt, which suggests this isn't a formal business call. Mr. Hale, she says, settling into the chair across from my couch, like she belongs there. I hope you don't mind the unscheduled visit. I was in the neighborhood, and I've been following your situation with great interest. Academic interest? I ask, pouring 2 glasses of wine because something tells me this conversation is going to require alcohol. Professional and personal, she admits. What you did to Hale and Winters, the way you structured your withdrawal, the legal mechanisms you used to protect your investment, it's brilliant. Ethically sound, legally airtight, and more elegant than anything I've seen in 20 years of studying corporate accountability. We talk for 3 hours about everything from business ethics to the future of legal education. And by the time she leaves, I realize 2 things. First, that I haven't had a conversation this intellectually stimulating since before Clara and I got married. And second, that Dr. Camille Rhodes has the kind of smile that makes you want to figure out what makes her laugh. As I'm cleaning up the wine glasses, I catch myself smiling for no particular reason except that for the first time in years, the future feels like something worth looking forward to instead of something to survive. Tomorrow, I start teaching a seminar at Columbia on entrepreneurial finance. Next week, I'm meeting with the Phoenix legal team to discuss expansion plans. And sometime soon, I might just ask Dr. Camille Rhodes if she'd like to continue our conversation over dinner. The war with Clara is over, and I won. But more importantly, I'm finally ready to start building something new. 6 months after the spectacular implosion of what used to be Clara's legal empire, I'm sitting in my new apartment on the Upper West Side, grading papers from my Columbia Law School seminar on entrepreneurial finance, when the FedEx courier shows up with a package that's about to close the final chapter of the Marcus Hale revenge story. The apartment is smaller than my old place. No marble countertops or floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, but it gets sunlight. Real, honest-to-God sunlight that streams through normal-sized windows and makes everything feel warm and alive instead of like a museum exhibit designed to impress people I never really liked anyway. The FedEx envelope is addressed in handwriting I recognize immediately, even though it's been months since I've seen Clara's distinctive cursive. No return address, but the Portland postmark tells me everything I need to know about how far she's fallen from the Manhattan legal scene she once thought she was going to conquer. I pour myself a cup of coffee, regular coffee, not the $20 a pound Colombian stuff I used to drink because expensive was supposed to mean better, and settle into the reading chair I bought from a furniture store in Queens instead of some boutique showroom where they charge extra for the privilege of being condescended to by interior designers. The letter inside is written on plain white paper, the kind you can buy at any drugstore, and it's only 1 page long. But sometimes 1 page is enough to say everything that needs saying. Marcus, asterisk. I moved to Portland 3 months ago. I know that probably doesn't surprise you. Everyone in the New York legal community knows by now that Clara Winters Hale is persona non grata east of the Hudson River, asterisk. I work at a nonprofit clinic now, helping people who can't afford lawyers navigate immigration cases and housing disputes. The pay is terrible. The office is in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, and I've never been happier to go to work in the morning, asterisk. I understand now what you tried to tell me that night in your apartment. I understand the difference between being respected and being famous, between building something real and building something that looks good in legal trade publications, asterisk. I spent 8 years married to a man who supported my dreams even when I didn't deserve his support, and I threw it all away because I thought I needed to prove something to people whose opinions shouldn't have mattered, asterisk. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness or understanding or even acknowledgement that this letter exists. But I wanted you to know that I'm different now. Not better, necessarily, but different. Real, asterisk. The woman who served you divorce papers at that party was playing a character she thought she was supposed to be. The woman writing this letter is just Clara, trying to figure out how to live with the choices she made and the bridges she burned. Asterisk. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. Asterisk. Clara asterisk. I read the letter twice, then fold it carefully and slide it into the desk drawer where I keep important documents that I'm not ready to throw away but don't need to look at every day. Next to tax returns and insurance policies and the deed to this apartment that nobody helped me pick out because I'm perfectly capable of choosing my own goddamn living space. There's no anger in me anymore when I think about Clara. No bitterness or resentment or desire for further revenge. Just a kind of distant sadness for the woman she could have been if she'd figured out who she actually was before she tried to become someone else. The irony is that the Clara who wrote this letter, the one working in a strip mall legal clinic, making terrible money to help people who actually need help, that's the woman I fell in love with 10 years ago. That's the woman I would have supported and encouraged and built a life with if she'd existed anywhere except in my memory of who she used to be. But that woman disappeared somewhere between law school graduation and the first time someone called her a rising star in Manhattan legal circles. She got replaced by someone who cared more about appearances than reality, more about being seen as successful than actually doing work that mattered. Maybe Portland will give her a chance to find her way back to who she was supposed to be. Maybe working in that strip mall clinic will teach her the difference between having a career and having a calling. Maybe she'll figure out that respect has to be earned through actions, not bought with other people's money. Or maybe she won't. Maybe this is just another performance, another carefully crafted image designed to make me think she's learned something she hasn't actually learned. I've been fooled by Clara Winters before, and the smart money says I shouldn't trust anything she says or writes or claims to believe. But here's the thing about being Marcus Hale. I don't have to figure out whether Clara's redemption arc is real or fake. That's her problem to solve, not mine. My phone buzzes with a text from Camille Rhodes, Dr. Camille Rhodes, who turned out to be exactly as brilliant and funny and genuinely interesting as she seemed that first night she showed up at my door unannounced. We've been dating for 3 months now. If you can call it dating, when two middle-aged professionals grab dinner between teaching schedules and discuss constitutional law over wine like it's the most natural thing in the world. Dinner at 7? That new Ethiopian place in the village? Asterisk. I text back. Asterisk perfect. Just finished grading papers. Ready for food that doesn't come with student complaints about grade curves? Asterisk. Bring the good wine. I have news about the Phoenix Legal expansion. Asterisk. The Phoenix Legal Collective has been the best investment I've made in years, and not just financially. Lydia Torres and her team have opened 3 new offices across the city, hired 47 new attorneys, and won some cases that have corporate legal departments genuinely nervous about treating poor people like they're disposable. Last month, they convinced a federal judge to certify a class action lawsuit against one of the biggest property management companies in New York, representing over 2,000 tenants who were illegally charged fees that nobody bothered to explain or justify. The settlement is going to run into 8 figures, and every penny of it goes to people who actually need the money instead of lawyers who already have too much. That's what victory looks like when you're building something instead of destroying something. When you're creating value instead of just redistributing wealth from people who trusted you to people who betrayed them. I look out my window at the street below, where normal people are living normal lives without worrying about legal empires or corporate restructuring, or whether their spouse is planning to publicly humiliate them at parties they paid for. A couple is walking hand in hand toward the subway, probably heading to jobs that don't require them to question everyone's motives or document every financial transaction like they're preparing for war. That could be me and Camille in 6 months, or a year, or whenever we figure out that what we have is worth making official. Walking to dinner without checking our phones for urgent messages from lawyers or accountants or business partners who think the world will end if they don't have immediate answers to questions that could wait until tomorrow. The sunlight is starting to fade, painting my apartment in shades of gold and amber that make everything look warm and possible. In an hour, I'll meet Camille at that Ethiopian restaurant, and we'll talk about Phoenix Legal's expansion plans and her research on legal ethics, and maybe what we're doing next weekend when neither of us has papers to grade or cases to review. Later tonight, I'll come home to this apartment that belongs entirely to me, pour myself a glass of wine that costs exactly what wine should cost, and read a book that has nothing to do with business or law or revenge or any of the things that consumed my life for the past year. Tomorrow, I'll teach eager law students about the intersection of entrepreneurship and ethics, help Lydia Torres figure out how to fund legal clinics in underserved communities, and maybe take Camille to that art gallery opening she mentioned. The war with Clara is over. The reconstruction of Marcus Hale is complete. And for the first time in longer than I care to remember, the future feels like something to build instead of something to survive. I closed the desk drawer with Clara's letter inside and walked toward the window, where the last of the afternoon sunlight is turning the city into something that looks almost like hope. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so good that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. And that, I realize, is the ultimate victory. I stood there on my front porch, coffee mug warming my hands, staring out at the little patch of earth I'd turned into something beautiful over the past few years. My garden was my pride, my quiet corner of the world after everything fell apart with Clarissa. The divorce had been messy, years of arguments, tears, and her walking out the door with half my life in her suitcase. But I'd found peace here in this sleepy Illinois suburb, just me and my flowers. Roses, tulips, daisies, all of them growing strong under my care. A little fence I'd built myself, keeping it all safe. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That peace lasted right up until the day I saw the moving truck 3 houses down. I didn't think much of it at first, just new neighbors, probably some nice folks looking for a quiet life like me. Then I saw her step out of the passenger's side, flipping her hair like she always did when she was trying to look important. Clarissa, my ex-wife. My stomach dropped. She'd moved into my cul-de-sac, like some kind of cruel joke from the universe. Then came Rick. I didn't know his name yet, but I saw him climb out of the driver's seat, a big guy, broad shoulders, buzzed hair, the kind of man who looked like he'd spend his life barking orders. His truck was one of those oversized monsters, all chrome and noise, the kind you'd expect from someone who needed everyone to notice him. I watched them unpack, hoping maybe they'd keep to themselves. But hope's a funny thing. It doesn't last long when reality kicks in. A few days later, I was out watering my roses when I heard that truck roar to life. I glanced up just in time to see Rick peel out of their driveway, cut the corner sharp, and roll right over the edge of my lawn. The tires left deep ruts in the grass, tearing up the green I'd spent months keeping neat. I stood there, hose dripping in my hand, jaw tight. It wasn't the garden yet, just the grass, but it felt like a warning. It happened again the next week, then the week after that. Each time, he'd swing that truck wide, leaving tire marks like scars across my yard. I'd grit my teeth and fix it, telling myself it wasn't worth a fight. But then one Saturday morning, I was kneeling in the dirt, planting some new marigolds, when I heard the rumble. Before I could even stand, Rick's truck came barreling straight through my garden. The front tires crushed my roses, the back ones flattened the tulips. Petals scattered everywhere, stems snapped like bones. I shot to my feet, heart pounding, fist clenched. He didn't even slow down, just kept going, windows down, laughing like it was some big game. I looked over at their house and saw Clarissa on the porch, sipping something from a glass, smirking at me like she used to when she knew she'd won an argument. I couldn't take it anymore. I marched across the street, dirt still on my knees, and stopped at the edge of their driveway. "Hey," I called out, voice shaking with anger. Rick climbed out of his truck, all swagger, wiping his hands on his jeans like he'd just done some real work. Clarissa stayed where she was, watching me with that same smug look. "You mind keeping your truck off my property?" I said, trying to keep it civil. Rick just grinned, showing too many teeth. "What's the big deal, man? It's just some flowers." I felt my blood boil. "It's my garden. I've been working on it for years. You don't get to roll through it like it's nothing." He laughed, a loud, barking sound, and looked over at Clarissa like I was some kind of clown. She finally spoke, her voice dripping with that old familiar venom. "Oh, Marcus, lighten up. Men will be men. Rick's a real man, not like some people." I stood there, staring at her, feeling that old sting. A real man. She'd thrown that at me during the divorce too, like I was less because I didn't strut around breaking things to prove a point. Rick clapped a hand on his truck, still chuckling. "Maybe you should get a tougher hobby, buddy. Flowers? That's cute." I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked back to my house, jaw so tight it hurt. I could hear them laughing behind me, the sound cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. When I got inside, I slammed the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. My garden, what was left of it, was a mess. Crushed petals, broken stems, tire tracks slicing through it like a wound. I'd spent years building that little piece of peace, and in one morning, they'd torn it apart. I looked out the window at their house, at that stupid truck parked like it owned the street, and something shifted in me. This wasn't just about flowers anymore. This was personal. They wanted to push me? Fine. I'd push back. Not with yelling or fists. I wasn't Rick. I'd do it my way. I didn't know how yet, but standing there, staring at the wreckage of my sanctuary, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I woke up every Saturday after that with a knot in my gut, waiting for the sound of Rick's truck. It became a routine I hated, me sipping coffee on the porch, pretending everything was fine, while my eyes kept darting to their house 3 doors down. Sure enough, like clockwork, I'd hear that engine rev up, loud and obnoxious, and there he'd go. Rick would peel out of their driveway, swing wide, and tear right through my yard again. The first few times, it was just the grass, but now he'd gotten bolder. He'd aim for the garden itself, tires chewing up what was left of my flowers, leaving mud and broken stems in his wake. I'd stand there, gripping my mug so tight I thought it might crack, watching him roar off down the street like he owned the whole damn neighborhood. And there was Clarissa, every time, perched on their porch with a drink in her hand, watching it all like it was her favorite show. She'd wave at me sometimes, that little smirk on her face, like she was daring me to do something about it. I tried talking to them again. Stupid, I know, but I thought maybe I could reason with him. One afternoon, after he'd flattened my daisies, I walked over, hands shoved in my pockets so I wouldn't do something dumb like swing at him. Rick was leaning against his truck, wiping down the hood like it was a prize horse. Clarissa sat on the steps, swirling ice in her glass. Hey, I started, keeping my voice steady. I'm asking you again, keep that thing off my yard. It's not a racetrack. Rick didn't even look up, just kept polishing. It's just a little fun, man. Relax. Fun. That word hit me like a slap. It's not fun for me, I said. That garden's mine. I put years into it. You're wrecking it for no reason. He finally straightened up, towering over me with that smug grin. It's just dirt and petals, Marcus. Maybe if you had something worth protecting, I'd care. I felt my face heat up, but before I could snap back, Clarissa chimed in. He's asserting his manhood, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. You wouldn't get it. Asserting his manhood. I wanted to laugh, but all I could feel was the rage bubbling up inside me. I walked away again that day, their laughter chasing me back to my house. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, they turned it into a joke. I'd patch up the garden as best I could, replant what I could save, smooth out the ruts, but it wasn't the same. The neat rows were gone, the fence was leaning, and every fix felt like a Band-Aid on a broken leg. I started avoiding my own front yard, just so I wouldn't have to see the damage. But I couldn't avoid the sound. Every weekend, that truck. Every weekend, their mocking voices. Rick started yelling stuff when he drove by, nice weeds, buddy, or grow a pair, flower boy. And Clarissa would cackle like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying it all in my head. It wasn't just the garden anymore. It was the way they looked at me, like I was nothing, like I'd always been nothing to her. Then came the morning that broke me. I'd stayed up late the night before, working on a new section of the garden, trying to bring it back to life. I'd rebuilt the wooden fence by hand, hammering each plank into place, feeling a little bit of pride creep back in. I went to bed tired but hopeful. When I woke up, I shuffled outside with my coffee, expecting to see my work still standing. Instead, I froze. The garden was gone. Not just damaged, destroyed. Every plant was uprooted, stomped flat, or torn out. The fence I'd spent hours on was kicked in, splintered wood scattered everywhere. Deep tire tracks ran through the middle, and I could still smell the exhaust hanging in the air. It looked like a war zone, like some monster had ripped through it just to spite me. I dropped my mug, coffee splashing on my boots, and just stood there, chest tight, hands shaking. I didn't need to guess who did it. I could hear Rick's truck idling down the street, and when I looked up, there he was, leaning out the window with that same stupid grin. Oops, he called out, then gunned the engine and took off. Clarissa was on the porch again, laughing so hard she nearly spilled her drink. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared at the mess, my mess now. The last thing I had, the one thing I'd held on to after she left me, was gone. It wasn't just dirt and petals to me. It was every quiet morning I'd spent out there, every hour I'd poured into making something good out of the wreckage she'd left behind. And they'd taken it, just because they could. I walked back inside, slammed the door, and sank into a chair, my mind racing. I wasn't going to beg them anymore. I wasn't going to yell or reason or play their game. They thought they could walk all over me, literally, and get away with it. They thought I'd just take it, like I always had with her. But not this time. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But as I sat there, staring at my muddy boots, a fire started burning in me. This wasn't about flowers anymore. This was about them thinking they could break me and laugh while they did it. I wasn't broken yet, and I wasn't going to let them win. I'd find a way to make them regret this. I'd make sure of it. I couldn't sleep that night after they trashed my garden. I kept seeing it every time I closed my eyes. The smashed flowers, the broken fence, the tire tracks cutting through it all like a knife. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with anger and something else, something sharper. I wasn't just going to fix it this time. I wasn't going to let Rick and Clarissa keep laughing at me like I was some pushover they could stomp on whenever they felt like it. By the time the sun came up, I'd made up my mind. I needed a plan, something smart, something that'd hit them where it hurt without me ever throwing a punch. I didn't have Rick's size or Clarissa's venom, but I had my head, and I was going to use it. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Cal Benton's name. If anyone could help me pull this off, it was him. Cal was an old friend from way back, before Clarissa, before the divorce, when life was simpler. He lived out in the sticks now, a farmer with a knack for tinkering. He'd built all kinds of weird stuff over the years, contraptions for his crops, gadgets to scare off crows, even a little robot dog once, just for laughs. I hadn't talked to him in a while, but he owed me a favor from a few summers ago when I'd helped him haul hay after his truck broke down. I dialed his number, pacing my kitchen, the wrecked garden glaring at me through the window. "Marcus Shaw, you old dog," Cal answered, his voice rough and cheerful. "What's got you calling me at the crack of dawn?" I didn't waste time. "I need your help, Cal. My ex-wife's new husband's been tearing up my yard, and I'm done taking it. I want to set something up. Something to stop him cold." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Sounds like a man's crossed a line. Tell me what you're thinking." I laid it out. How Rick kept driving through my garden, how Clarissa egged him on, how they destroyed everything I'd built. Cal listened, grunting now and then, and when I finished, he didn't hesitate. "I've got just the thing," he said. "You ever hear of a perimeter mat? Farmers use 'em to keep cows from wandering. Low voltage won't kill anybody, but it'll make 'em wish they'd stayed home. I've got one I can tweak for you." My ears perked up. "What else you got?" He laughed again. "How about motion sprinklers? Freezing cold water hits 'em the second they step where they shouldn't. And, oh, you'll love this, a motion speaker. I rigged one up with a sound that'll scare the devil himself. Part demon, part hellhound, loud as sin. They'll think the gates of hell opened up." I could feel a grin creeping across my face. "That's perfect, Cal. Can you get it to me quick? Give me a day to round it up," he said. "I'll drop it off tomorrow. You owe me a beer after this, though." "Deal," I said, already feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Cal showed up the next afternoon, his beat-up truck rattling into my driveway. He climbed out, wiry and sunburned, hauling a box of gear that clinked and rattled. "Here's your revenge kit," he said, setting it down with a thud. He walked me through it. The mat was a thin, rubbery thing I could bury under a layer of dirt, wired to a little battery pack. The sprinklers were small but tough, easy to hide in the flower beds. And the speaker, he hooked it up to his phone and played the sound for me. It was a deep, guttural roar, like something out of a nightmare, loud enough to wake the whole street. "They'll crap their pants," Cal said, grinning. I nodded, picturing Rick's smug face turning to panic. "Let's hope so." We spent the rest of the day setting it up. I dug shallow trenches along the edge of my yard, laid the mat down, and covered it with soil so it looked like nothing was there. The sprinklers went in next, tucked behind what was left of my plants, aimed right at the path Rick always took. The speaker I hid under the porch, angled so the sound would blast out toward the street. Cal wired it all to motion sensors, step on the mat, and the whole show would start. I added one more thing, my old security cameras. I bought them cheap a while back, mostly to watch for package thieves, but now they'd be my eyes. I mounted one on the porch, another by the garage, both aimed at the yard. If Rick tried anything, I'd have proof. By the time we finished, the sun was setting, and my little house looked normal again, except now it was a trap, waiting to spring. Cal clapped me on the shoulder. You're a patient man, Marcus, but even patient men got limits. This'll teach him. I thanked him, handed him a cold beer from the fridge, and sent him on his way. Then I went inside, grabbed a fresh mug of coffee, and settled into a chair by the window. It was dark out, the street quiet, but I wasn't going to bed. I wanted to be awake when Rick made his next move. I knew he'd come. Weekends were his time to shine, and he wouldn't be able to resist tearing through my yard again, especially after wrecking it so bad. I sat there, sipping my coffee, the bitterness matching the fire in my chest. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside, had me on edge. I kept imagining it. His truck rolling up, the tires hitting the mat, the chaos that'd follow. I wasn't a violent guy. Never had been. But this wasn't about violence. This was about taking back what was mine, about showing them I wasn't the weak little man they thought I was. My garden was gone, sure, but my pride wasn't. I glanced at the cameras on my phone, their little green lights blinking in the dark. Everything was ready. All I had to do was wait. And as the night stretched on, that wait turned into something satisfying, like the calm before a storm you know is coming. They'd pushed me too far, and now they were going to find out what happens when I push back. I'd been sitting by the window for hours, the coffee in my mug long gone cold, when I finally saw it. Headlights cutting through the dark. It was 2 a.m., the street dead quiet except for the low growl of Rick's truck creeping closer. My heart started pounding, not out of fear, but something else. Anticipation, maybe even excitement. I'd spent all day setting up my trap with Cal, and now it was time to see if it worked. I leaned forward, peering through the blinds, watching that oversized beast of a vehicle roll down the cul-de-sac. Rick didn't even try to be subtle. He swung wide, just like always, aiming straight for my yard. I held my breath as the front tires crossed the line, hitting the spot where I'd buried the mat. Then it happened, zap. A sharp crackle split the air, faint but unmistakable, and the truck jerked like it had hit a wall. Rick's voice cut through the night, a high-pitched yelp that didn't match his big man swagger at all. Before he could figure out what was going on, the sprinklers kicked in. I'd aimed them just right, and now they blasted freezing water straight at his truck, spraying through the open windows. I could hear him cursing, loud and frantic, as the cold hit him. The demon roar came next. Cal's speaker let loose that ungodly sound, a deep, guttural howl that echoed off the houses like some monster had clawed its way out of hell. It was louder than I'd expected, rattling my windows, and I saw Rick's truck swerve hard, tires spinning in the wet dirt. He was yelling something I couldn't make out, probably swearing up a storm, and I couldn't help it. I grinned. The chaos was beautiful. Mud flew everywhere as he tried to peel out, the truck fishtailing like a panicked animal. Then I saw movement at their house. Clarissa came stumbling out onto the porch, wrapped in a robe, her hair a mess. She must have heard the noise and figured Rick needed her. She took 2 steps off the porch, barefoot, and hit the mat herself, a zap. She screamed, a wild, shrieking sound, hopping around like she'd stepped on a live wire. Rick, what the hell is this? She hollered, her voice cracking as the sprinklers caught her too, soaking her from head to toe. I couldn't stay inside anymore. I grabbed my jacket, slipped on my boots, and stepped out onto the porch, keeping my face calm like I'd just woken up to check on the commotion. The scene in front of me was better than I'd dreamed. Rick was half out of his truck, one leg stuck in the mud, water dripping off his buzzed head, his shirt plastered to his chest. Clarissa was a soggy mess, clutching her robe, shivering and glaring at everything like the world had personally betrayed her. The roar had stopped, the speaker was on a timer, but the sprinklers kept going, spitting icy water in little bursts. I crossed my arms and leaned against the railing, letting the silence settle for a second before I spoke. Problems? I said, keeping my voice even, like I was just a concerned neighbor. Rick whipped his head around, his face red and furious, but he didn't say anything right away. He was too busy trying to yank his boot out of the muck. Clarissa, though, she didn't miss a beat. She stormed toward me, slipping a little on the wet grass, pointing a dripping finger in my face. What did you do, Marcus? This is insane. We're calling the police. I didn't flinch. I'd been waiting for that threat, and I was ready. Please do, I said, meeting her eyes. I've got security footage of you two destroying my property for weeks. Cops might like to see it. That stopped her cold. Her mouth opened, then shut, and I could see the gears turning behind those angry eyes. Rick finally got free of the mud and stomped over, His fists balled up like he wanted to take a swing. You think you're smart? Huh? He growled, water still trickling down his neck. Setting up some little booby trap? You're pathetic. I shrugged, not moving an inch. I think it's pretty smart, actually. Key. You should try staying on your own side of the street next time. He took a step closer, chest puffed out, but Clarissa grabbed his arm. Rick, don't, she hissed, her voice low but sharp. He's not worth it. She was dripping wet, her robe clinging to her, and for once, she didn't look so smug. They stood there, glaring at me, and I just stared back, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. The cameras were rolling, the trap had worked, and for the first time since they'd moved in, I wasn't the one on the defensive. Rick muttered something under his breath, probably a curse, and turned back to his truck, kicking at the mud like it had personally offended him. Clarissa gave me one last venomous look before she followed, her slippers squishing with every step. This isn't over, she called over her shoulder, but it sounded hollow, like she wasn't so sure anymore. I watched them go, the truck limping back to their driveway, leaving a trail of water and defeat. I stayed on the porch a while longer, letting the night air cool me down, the sprinklers finally clicking off behind me. The yard was a mess again, mud and tire marks, but it didn't matter. This wasn't about the garden tonight. This was about showing them I wasn't going to roll over anymore. I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled up the camera footage on my phone. There it was, clear as day: Rick driving in, the mat zapping him, the sprinklers soaking him, Clarissa's little dance when she hit the trap too. I saved it all, every second, and leaned back in my chair. They could call the cops if they wanted. I'd love to see them try to explain this. For now, though, I'd won. Not the war, maybe, but this battle? This one was mine. I set the phone down, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat there in the quiet, savoring the taste of it. The night wasn't over yet, and neither was this fight, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was the one holding the cards. Let them come at me again. I'd be ready. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in weeks, the memory of Rick and Clarissa flailing in my trap still fresh in my mind. I'd slept hard, the kind of sleep you get when you know you've landed a good punch, even if it wasn't with my fists. The sun was just creeping over the rooftops as I stepped onto the porch with my coffee, expecting to see the muddy mess from last night. It was there, sure, tire tracks and puddles, but something else caught my eye. Rick's truck was parked crooked in their driveway, still streaked with dirt, and I could see him through their front window, pacing back and forth like a caged bear. Clarissa was nowhere in sight, probably still fuming in her soggy robe. I smirked into my mug. They'd threatened to call the cops, but the street was quiet, no sirens, no flashing lights. They backed off, at least for now. I didn't have long to enjoy it, though. Around noon, a car pulled up in front of my house. A sleek black sedan, the kind that screams lawyer or bill collector. A guy in a cheap suit stepped out, clipboard in hand, and marched up my walkway. I met him at the door before he could knock. Marcus Shaw, he asked, voice flat. That's me, I said, keeping my tone easy. He handed me a piece of paper, official-looking with a bunch of legal gibberish typed across it. Cease and desist order, he said. From Richard Dalton. Says you're harassing him with dangerous devices on your property. You've got 24 hours to remove them, or he's filing charges. I took the paper, glancing at the words, trespass, liability, damages. Rick's name was scrawled at the bottom in a big, sloppy signature. I almost laughed. Thanks, I told the guy, and he nodded, turned, and left without another word. I shut the door and read it over, my good mood souring. Harassment? Dangerous devices? That was rich, coming from the guy who'd been treating my yard like his personal demolition derby. I tossed the letter on the table and grabbed my phone, pulling up the footage from last night. There it was, Rick driving onto my property, the mat zapping him, the sprinklers soaking him. Private land, clear trespassing. If anyone had a case, it was me. I wasn't taking anything down. Let him try to push this. I'd shove it right back in his face. Still, I knew this wasn't the end. Rick didn't strike me as the type to let a little zap and some water stop him, and Clarissa was too stubborn to let me have the last word. I figured they'd lick their wounds for a day or two, then come at me again. I was right, just not in the way I expected. It started small that evening. I was out front, cleaning up the mud from the night before, when I noticed something off. A couple of ketchup packets were stuck to one of my garden gnomes, the kind you get from fast food joints, smeared red across its little hat. I frowned, picked them up, and tossed them in the trash, thinking maybe some kid had dropped them. Then, the next morning, I found empty beer cans jammed into what was left of my flower beds, 3 of them, crumpled and stinking of stale booze. I stood there, hands on my hips, staring at them. This wasn't random. Kids don't sneak around planting cans like that. I checked the cameras. Nothing clear, just shadows moving in the dark, too far off to make out a face. My gut told me it was Rick, though. He wasn't dumb enough to drive through again, not after last night. But this was petty enough to be him. It got worse over the next few days. One night, I came home from the hardware store to find garbage scattered across my lawn. Banana peels, coffee grounds, some wrappers, like someone had emptied a trash bag and run off. The next morning, I stepped outside and gagged. Someone had dumped a pile of used cat litter right by my porch steps. The smell hit me like a punch, sour and sharp, and I had to grab a shovel to scoop it into a bag before I could even get to my mailbox. I checked the cameras again. Still nothing solid, just a flicker of movement near the edge of the frame. Whoever it was knew where the blind spots were, and that made my blood run hot. Rick had been watching, figuring out how to dodge my setup. I could picture him snickering about it, Clarissa egging him on with that smirk of hers, thinking they'd found a new way to get under my skin. I wasn't wrong about them brooding, either. Every time I saw Rick outside, he'd glare at me across the street, his jaw tight, his big shoulders hunched like he was holding himself back. Clarissa kept her distance, but I'd catch her on their porch sometimes, staring at my house with those cold eyes, sipping her drink like she was plotting. They weren't yelling anymore, weren't mocking me to my face, but this quiet revenge was worse. It was sneaky, dirty, and it made me feel like my little victory last night hadn't meant a damn thing. I'd humiliated them, sure, but now they were hitting back in ways I couldn't prove. I spent hours cleaning up their messes, scrubbing ketchup off my gnomes, hauling trash to the curb, and every time I did, I felt that fire in my chest flare up again. The cease and desist letter sat on my table, mocking me too. Rick pretending he was the victim while he turned my yard into his dumping ground. I sat down that night with another coffee, staring out at the dark street, my mind racing. The trap had worked once, but it wasn't enough. They'd found a way around it, and I couldn't just sit here taking it. I needed to catch them, really catch them, with something the cameras couldn't miss. Something that'd stick, something they couldn't wiggle out of. I didn't know how yet, but as I watched their house, lights flickering behind their curtains, I knew one thing for sure. The worst was still coming. They weren't done with me, and I wasn't done with them. This was a game now, and I was going to play it better. I was starting to feel like a prisoner in my own house, always on edge, waiting for the next pile of garbage or petty jab from Rick and Clarissa. The cat litter had been the tipping point. Shoveling that stinking mess off my porch made me realize I couldn't just keep cleaning up after them. I needed proof, something solid to shove in their faces and end this once and for all. I'd been checking the cameras every day, but they were too smart, sticking to the shadows, hitting the spots where the lenses couldn't reach. I'd underestimated Rick. He wasn't just a loudmouth with a truck. He was cunning in his own nasty way. I sat there one night, coffee in hand, staring out at the dark street, when I saw it. A flicker of movement near the edge of my yard. Not a car this time, but a figure, quick and quiet, slipping through the shadows. My pulse kicked up. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed, squinting at the grainy image. It was him, Rick. I couldn't see his face clear enough to prove it, but I knew that bulky shape, the way he moved like he owned the place. I watched him creep closer, a sack slung over his shoulder, and my stomach twisted. He wasn't just tossing trash this time, he was up to something worse. I stayed still, barely breathing, letting him think I was asleep or gone. He stopped near what was left of my flower beds, knelt down, and started pouring something out of the sack. It wasn't garbage. It was white, grainy, catching the moonlight, salt. A whole damn bag of it, dumped right into the soil. I clenched my fist so hard my knuckles ached. He wasn't just messing with me now, he was poisoning the ground, making sure nothing would ever grow there again. My garden was already wrecked, but this was him spitting on the ashes, trying to kill any chance I had of bringing it back. He worked fast, spreading it thick, then stood up, dusted his hands, and slipped back into the dark toward his house. I sat there, shaking with rage, watching him disappear. He thought he'd gotten away clean. He was wrong. I pulled up the camera footage right away, rewinding to the moment he'd stepped into view. There it was clear as day this time. The camera by the garage had caught him dead on, his face lit up by a streetlight as he bent over with that sack. Rick Dalton, in all his smug glory, salting my earth like some cartoon villain. I saved the clip, my hands trembling not from fear, but from the thrill of finally having him. This wasn't just petty vandalism anymore. This was deliberate, calculated property damage. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my phone and dialed the local police, my voice steady even though my heart was hammering. "Yeah, hi. This is Marcus Shaw on Elm Street," I said when the dispatcher picked up. "I've got video of my neighbor trespassing and ruining my property. He just poured salt all over my yard to kill the soil. I need someone out here now." It didn't take long, maybe 20 minutes before I saw the cruiser roll up, lights off, parking quietly in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out, a younger guy with a buzz cut and an older woman with a no-nonsense look. I met them at the door, phone in hand. "Thanks for coming," I said, keeping it short. "I've got it all on camera." They followed me inside, and I played the footage, Rick sneaking in, dumping the salt, slinking off. The older cop raised an eyebrow. "That's pretty blatant," she said, jotting something in her notebook. "You know who this is?" "Yeah," I said. "Rick Dalton. Lives 3 houses down. He's been tearing up my yard for weeks with his truck, too. I've got more video if you need it." She nodded. "This'll do for now. Let's go have a word with him." I stayed on my porch, watching as they walked down the street, their flashlights bouncing in the dark. I could see Rick's truck still parked in their driveway, and a light flicked on inside as the cops knocked. The door opened, and there he was, shirtless, looking annoyed until he saw the uniforms. I couldn't hear what they said, but I saw his arms start flailing, his voice rising, probably trying to bluster his way out of it. Then the younger cop stepped forward, calm but firm, and Rick's shoulders slumped. Clarissa appeared behind him, her face pale, clutching that damn robe again. She started yelling too, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "This is ridiculous. You're ruining our family over some dirt?" I just stood there, arms crossed, letting it wash over me. The cops didn't flinch. They talked for a few more minutes. Then Rick stepped outside, hands behind his back. I heard the click of handcuffs, and my chest loosened a little. They walked him to the cruiser, his head down, Clarissa shrieking after them like a banshee. The older cop came back to me while the other loaded Rick into the car. "We're taking him in for trespassing and property damage," she said. "That video's solid. You want to press charges?" "Damn right I do," I said, no hesitation. She gave me a small nod, like she'd expected that. "We'll need you to come down to the station tomorrow with the footage. For now, he's spending the night in a cell." I thanked her, and they drove off, Rick's silhouette slumped in the back seat. Clarissa stood on her porch, watching them go, then turned and glared at me, her eyes burning even from that distance. I shrugged, just enough for her to see it. "Should have thought of that before you ruined my garden," I said, loud enough to carry. She didn't answer, just spun around and slammed her door. I went back inside, locked up, and sank into my chair, the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. The yard was a lost cause now, salted and dead, but that didn't matter tonight. I'd caught him. I'd won this round, and they couldn't laugh it off this time. I poured myself a fresh coffee, the steam curling up, and let myself smile. It wasn't over, Clarissa's look told me that much, but for now, I had the upper hand, and it felt good. I woke up the next morning to a quiet street, the kind of stillness that felt almost too good to be true after everything. Rick was gone, hauled off in cuffs the night before, and I figured Clarissa was still reeling from it all. I stepped outside with my coffee, expecting to feel some kind of triumph, but the sight of my yard, the salted soil, the broken fence, dampened it a little. I'd gotten him, sure, but the damage was done. Still, I wasn't about to let that ruin the moment. I sipped my coffee and watched their house, wondering how long it'd take Rick to post bail. Not long, it turned out. By noon, I saw his truck roll back into their driveway, slower than usual, like he was trying not to draw attention. He climbed out, head down, and disappeared inside without a glance my way. Clarissa stepped onto the porch a minute later, pacing like a caged animal, her phone pressed to her ear. I couldn't hear her, but her wild gestures told me she was furious, probably yelling at a lawyer or a friend about how unfair it all was. The neighborhood started buzzing after that. I caught Mrs. Henley, the old lady next door, peering over her fence at me while she watered her plants. "Heard the cops were here last night," she said, her voice curious but not pushy. "Yeah," I said, keeping it simple. "Caught him wrecking my yard on camera." She nodded, a little smile tugging at her lips. "Good for you, Marcus. That man's been a menace since he showed up." It wasn't just her. Other neighbors started giving me nods or quick waves when I passed by, like I'd done something they'd all been too polite to try. It felt good, knowing I wasn't alone in this, but it didn't last long. That night, around 3 a.m., I jolted awake to a sharp crackling sound outside. I stumbled to the window, rubbing sleep from my eyes, and saw it, flames licking up from my trash can by the curb, a bright orange glow against the dark. My heart sank. I grabbed my phone and ran out in my boxers and a t-shirt, the cold air biting at me as I snatched the garden hose from the porch. The fire wasn't big, mostly paper and leaves, but the smell of burning plastic hit me hard as I sprayed it down. The can was half melted by the time I got the flames out, a charred mess dripping onto the pavement. I stood there, hose dripping in my hand, breathing fast, the wet grass soaking my bare feet. This wasn't an accident. Someone had lit it, and I didn't need 3 guesses to figure out who. I glanced at their house, dark, quiet, no sign of life, but I knew. Rick might have been licking his wounds, but Clarissa? She was a different kind of mad, the kind that didn't stop. I trudged back inside, soaked and shivering, and pulled up the camera footage. My stomach twisted as I watched a hooded figure, quick and careful, slipping up to the kin with a lighter in hand. The angle was off, the face shadowed, but I recognized her shape, the way she moved. Clarissa. She'd stayed just out of the clear frame, dodging the spots where the cameras could nail her. Smart. Too smart. I sat there, staring at the screen, the anger building slow and steady. She'd gone too far now. Arson wasn't a prank, wasn't petty trash tossing. This was dangerous, and I couldn't let it slide. But the footage wasn't enough, not yet. The cops would call it circumstantial, and she'd wiggle out of it with that smug grin of hers. I needed more, something airtight, but I didn't know how to get it. I spent the next day cleaning up the mess, hauling the ruined can to the garage, my mind racing. Rick stayed out of sight, probably under orders to lay low after his arrest, but Clarissa was everywhere, pacing her porch, glaring at me whenever I stepped outside, her eyes like daggers. The neighbors kept their distance now, whispering among themselves, and I could feel the tension creeping up the street. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. I started double-checking the cameras every night, tweaking their angles, hoping to catch her if she tried again. I even set the sprinklers back up, just in case Rick got bold, but it was Clarissa I was worried about now. She was unhinged, wilder than I'd ever seen her, even during the divorce. I'd humiliated her precious Rick, and she wasn't going to let that go. I barely slept, jumping at every sound, my coffee going cold as I sat by the window, watching, waiting. I was ready for a long game. She'd slip up eventually, and I'd be there when she did. But then, out of nowhere, help came knocking. It was late afternoon, the sun dipping low, when I heard a tap on my door. I opened it to find Brielle Knox, the teenage girl from 2 houses over, standing there with her hands in her pockets. She was a quiet kid, always fiddling with that drone of hers, and I'd never talked to her much beyond a wave hello. "Hey, Mr. Shaw," she said, shifting her weight. "I, saw what happened with your trash can, and I know who did it." I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" She glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "I've got drone footage. Caught her lighting it. Clarissa. She egged my dog's crate last week, and I've been watching her ever since. I'm done with her crap." My jaw dropped. "You've got video?" She nodded, pulling out her phone. Clear as day. "Want it?" I grinned, wider than I had in weeks. "Brielle, you just became my favorite neighbor." She smirked a little, and I knew right then, this was the break I'd been waiting for. Clarissa was done. I stood there on my porch, still reeling from Brielle's visit, my mind buzzing with what she'd just handed me. She'd show me the drone footage on her phone, grainy at first, but then it zoomed in, clear as daylight. There was Clarissa, sneaking out of her house in that hoodie, lighter flickering in her hand as she bent over my trash can. The flames caught quick, and she darted back, glancing around like a nervous cat before disappearing into the shadows. Brielle had caught every second, her drone hovering silent above the street. "I figured you'd want this," she'd said, her voice sharp with her own grudge. "She's been a jerk to everyone, not just you." I'd nodded, barely able to speak, and she'd sent me the file right then and there. "Thanks, Brielle," I'd managed, and she'd shrugged like it was nothing, heading back home with her hands in her pockets. But it wasn't nothing, it was everything. I went inside, locked the door, and pulled up the video on my laptop, watching it again, then again. My hands were steady now, no more shaking, just a calm certainty settling in. This wasn't like the camera footage of Rick, blurry and arguable. This was her face, her movements, undeniable. Arson. She crossed a line she couldn't walk back from, and I had her dead to rights. I burned the video to a USB drive, grabbed my jacket, and headed to the police station that afternoon. The same older cop from Rick's arrest was there, her badge reading Officer Grant. She looked up from her desk as I walked in, raising an eyebrow. "Back already, Mr. Shaw?" she said, leaning back in her chair. "Yeah," I said, holding up the drive. "Got something new. Clarissa Dalton this time. She set my trash can on fire the other night, caught it all on video." She took the drive, plugged it into her computer, and watched the footage in silence. I stood there, arms crossed, feeling the weight lift off me with every second she stared at the screen. When it finished, she let out a low whistle. "That's her, all right," she said, scribbling something on a notepad. "Where'd you get this?" "Neighbor kid with a drone," I said. "She's got her own beef with Clarissa." "Lucky for me." Grant nodded, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. "Lucky indeed. This is solid. We'll pick her up today." I felt a rush of relief, like I could finally breathe again. "Thanks," I said, and she waved me off. "Just doing the job. You pressing charges on this one too?" "You bet," I said, no hesitation. She gave me a look, half respect, half amusement, and told me to head home. They'd handle it. I was back on my porch by late afternoon, coffee in hand, when the cruiser rolled up to their house. I watched from a distance, keeping it casual, like I was just enjoying the day. Two officers, Grant and the younger guy from before, knocked on the door. Clarissa answered, still in that robe, her hair a mess. I couldn't hear the words, but her arms started flailing, her voice rising sharp and loud. "This is insane. You can't do this," she shouted, loud enough for me to catch it. Grant stayed calm, saying something I couldn't make out, and then the younger cop stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Clarissa froze, her mouth open, then tried to back inside. They didn't let her. Grant grabbed her arm, gentle but firm, and turned her around. The cuffs clicked, and she started yelling again, a string of curses and pleas that echoed down the street. Rick came barreling out then, his face red, fist clenched. "What the hell's going on?" he roared, stomping toward the cops. I tensed, expecting a fight, but the younger officer moved fast, blocking Rick's path. "Step back, sir," he said, voice hard. Rick didn't listen. He swung an arm, not at the cop but toward me, pointing across the street. "This is you, isn't it, you little bastard?" he bellowed. I didn't move, just sipped my coffee, meeting his glare. The cop grabbed him, twisting his arm back, and Rick stumbled, swearing as they held him in place. Clarissa was still shrieking, her voice cracking now, as they walked her to the cruiser. "He's lying. It's all lies," she cried, but it sounded weak, desperate. The neighbors were out now, Mrs. Henley on her lawn, a couple others peeking through windows, and I could feel their eyes on them. Grant shoved Clarissa into the back seat, slamming the door, while the younger cop kept Rick pinned until he stopped thrashing. "Stay here," he told Rick, then joined Grant in the car. They drove off, Clarissa's muffled yells fading into the distance, leaving Rick standing there, panting, staring at me like he could burn my house down with his eyes. I set my mug down and walked to the edge of my porch, hands in my pockets. Rick took a step toward me, his fists balled up again, but he stopped short, maybe remembering the cops weren't far. "You're dead for this," he growled, low and mean. "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "But she lit the fire, not me. You should have kept her on a leash." His face twisted, and for a second, I thought he'd charge anyway, but he just spat on the ground and stormed back inside, slamming his door so hard the windows rattled. I stood there a minute longer, the street quiet again, the weight of it all sinking in. Clarissa was gone, arrested, locked up, and Rick was stuck, helpless for once. I'd done it. Not just a zap or a scare this time. I'd hit them where it hurt. I went back inside, locked up, and sank into my chair, the adrenaline fading into something calmer. The garden was still a wreck, the trash can a melted lump, but none of that mattered right now. I'd taken back control, piece by piece, and they couldn't laugh it off anymore. The fight wasn't over, Rick's glare told me that. But tonight, I'd won. And that was enough. I woke up the next morning to a street that felt different, quieter, heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. Clarissa was gone, locked up on arson charges, and Rick was stuck licking his wounds. I stepped outside with my coffee, expecting to feel some kind of victory, but it was bittersweet. The salted soil stared back at me, a dead patch where my garden used to be, and I couldn't shake the weight of it all. I'd won a battle, sure, but the war had left scars I couldn't ignore. I sipped my coffee and watched their house, the curtains drawn tight, No sign of life. Rick's truck sat in the driveway, still streaked with mud from that night I'd zapped him, and I wondered how long he'd stay quiet. Not long. I figured he wasn't the type to let this go, not with Clarissa behind bars because of me. The neighborhood had shifted too. Mrs. Henley waved at me from her yard, a little more warmth in it than usual, and I caught a few other neighbors glancing my way, some with nods, some with quick looks before turning away. Word had spread fast. Rick's arrest, Clarissa's meltdown, the whole messy saga. I wasn't sure if they saw me as a hero or just the guy who'd stirred up trouble, but it didn't matter. They weren't glaring at me like I was the problem anymore, and that was something. I spent the day keeping busy, cleaning up the last of the trash can mess, tweaking the cameras just in case, but my mind kept drifting back to Clarissa in that cell, Rick stewing across the street. She'd be out eventually, on bail or probation. And then what? I wasn't naive enough to think this was the end. Weeks passed, slow and tense. Clarissa came back one afternoon, a cab dropping her off in front of their house. I watched from my window as she climbed out, her face hard and cold, no robe this time. Just jeans and a jacket, her hair pulled back tight. She didn't look my way, just marched inside, and the door slammed behind her. Rick stepped out a minute later, head down, and I saw the sheriff's deputy parked nearby, probably enforcing the restraining order I'd filed after the fire. He couldn't come near my place now, not legally, and that gave me a little breathing room. But the silence from their house wasn't peace. It was a storm brewing, and I could feel it in my bones. They didn't go out much after that. No porch drinks, no loud truck revving, just a cold, bitter quiet that hung over the cul-de-sac like a fog. Then one night, it broke. I was out front, checking the mail under the streetlights, when I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate. I turned, and there was Rick, stomping across the street, his face twisted with something dark. My stomach tightened, but I stood my ground, hands in my pockets, keeping it casual. He stopped a few feet away, just outside the line the restraining order set, his fists clenched so tight I could see the veins popping. "You happy now?" he growled, his voice low and rough. "You destroyed us, you smug little prick." I looked at him, his buzzed hair glinting under the light, his eyes wild, and I felt a flicker of something. Pity, maybe, but not enough to soften me. "I didn't destroy anything," I said, keeping my tone even. "You two did that yourselves. Driving through my yard, salting my garden, setting fires, that's on you." He took a step closer, testing the line, and I tensed, ready to call the cops if he crossed it. "You think you're so smart," he spat. "Putting her in jail, ruining everything. We're the laughingstock of this damn street because of you." I shrugged, not taking my eyes off him. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you trashed my life." "I didn't start this, Rick." He opened his mouth, probably to yell, but then something stopped him, a voice, sharp and young, cutting through the dark. "Leave him alone." I turned, surprised, and saw Aiden, Clarissa's 14-year-old son from her first marriage, stepping out from their driveway. I hadn't seen much of him since they moved in, just a quiet kid who kept to himself, usually glued to his phone or kicking a ball in their backyard. He marched up, his skinny frame tense, his face flushed. Rick spun on him, furious. "Get back inside, kid," he snapped. But Aiden didn't budge. "No," he said, his voice shaking but firm. "You told her to do it. Mom said it was your idea, the fire, all of it. I'm done with this." I stood there, stunned, as Rick's face went slack, like the air had been punched out of him. "What the hell are you talking about?" he growled, but Aiden didn't back down. "She told me last night. You pushed her to mess with him, to get back at him." "I heard you." Rick took a step toward him, hand raised like he might grab him, but Aiden flinched away, turning to me instead. "I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw," he said, his voice cracking. "I thought it was just a joke at first, the truck stuff, but it wasn't. I didn't know it'd get this bad." I didn't know what to say, my throat felt tight, caught off guard by this kid standing there, spilling it all. "It's okay, Aiden," I managed. "Takes a lot to say that." He nodded, quick and jerky, then turned and walked back to the house, leaving Rick standing there, frozen. Rick didn't move for a long moment, his fists unclenching, his shoulders slumping. He looked at me, something broken in his eyes, then muttered, "This ain't over," and trudged back across the street. But it didn't feel like a threat this time. It felt like a man who'd run out of fight. I watched him go, the door slamming behind him, and stood there in the quiet, processing it all. Aiden's words echoed in my head. Rick had pushed her, and now their own kid had turned on them. Their reputation was shot, their family cracking, and I hadn't even had to lift a finger this time. I went back inside, locked up, and sat down with my coffee, the night settling around me. It wasn't joy I felt, not exactly. It was something closer to relief, mixed with a strange ache I couldn't name. They were breaking, and I'd helped make it happen. That was enough for now. I woke up to a morning that felt lighter than any I could remember since Clarissa and Rick moved in. The sun was out, casting long shadows across the street, and their house sat quiet, no truck rumbling, no porch pacing, just stillness. I stepped outside with my coffee, the air crisp with that early fall bite, and looked at my yard. The salted patch was still there, an ugly scar where my garden used to bloom, but it didn't sting as much today. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine, Mrs. Henley's whispers mostly, that Clarissa and Rick were packing up. The for sale sign went up a week after Aiden's blow-up, and by the end of summer, they were gone. No big goodbye, no last stand, just a moving truck one night and an empty house the next morning. I stood there, sipping my coffee, staring at the blank windows across the street, and felt something settle in me. Not triumph, exactly, but a kind of peace I hadn't had in months. The days after that stretched into weeks, then months, and the cul-de-sac started to heal. The neighbors came out more. Mrs. Henley puttered in her yard. Brielle flew her drone around. Even the quiet couple down the block started planting flowers of their own. My yard stayed bare for a while, the salt keeping anything from growing, but I wasn't in a rush. I'd sit on my porch every evening, coffee in hand, watching the street settle into something normal again. I didn't hear much about Clarissa and Rick after they left. Just rumors they'd moved to some apartment across town, still fighting, still bitter. I didn't care enough to dig deeper. They were out of my life, and that was all that mattered. But then, one crisp fall morning, I heard a knock on my door, soft but insistent. I set my mug down, curious, and opened it to find Aiden standing there, a small potted plant in his hands. He looked different, taller maybe, or just less hunched, his dark hair messy under a baseball cap. "Hey, Mr. Shaw," he said, shifting his weight, his voice quiet but steady. "I brought this. For your garden." I blinked, caught off guard, and took the pot. A little marigold, its yellow blooms bright against the green. "Thanks," I said, setting it on the porch railing. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged, kicking at the step with his sneaker. "I wanted to. We're better now. Different place. Mom's still mad, but she's not, I don't know, crazy like before. I just didn't want you to think we were all like that." I looked at him, this kid who'd stood up to Rick that night, and felt a warmth I hadn't expected. "Takes a lot to say that, Aiden," I said, meaning it. "I appreciate it." He nodded, quick and awkward, then mumbled a goodbye and headed off, his hands shoved in his pockets as he disappeared down the street. I stood there a minute, holding that little plant, and something clicked. I'd spent months fighting, setting traps, chasing proof. Hell, I'd turned my yard into a battlefield just to make them stop. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about moving on. I took the marigold inside, grabbed a shovel, and went to work. The salted spot was still dead, but I dug around it, clearing a new patch near the porch where the soil was clean. I planted Aiden's gift there, patting the dirt down, feeling the earth under my hands again. It wasn't much, just one plant, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, I added more. Daisies, tulips, even a couple rose bushes I picked up cheap at the hardware store. The neighbors noticed. Mrs. Henley brought me some cuttings from her yard, and Brielle started swinging by with her dog, a scruffy mutt named Rusty, to check my progress. "Looks good, Mr. Shaw," she'd say, her drone buzzing overhead, and I'd nod, wiping sweat off my brow. The garden came back slow, piece by piece, and with it, the street felt alive again. I'd sit out there every evening, coffee steaming in the cool air, watching the flowers catch the last light of day. The tire tracks faded, the broken fence got rebuilt, stronger this time, and that salted patch started to soften, grass creeping in where nothing used to grow. It wasn't the same as before, couldn't be, not after everything, but it was mine again, and that was enough. Brielle became a regular visitor, her dog flopping in my yard while she told me about school or her latest drone tricks. "Caught a raccoon on video last night," she'd say, grinning, and I'd laugh, feeling lighter than I had in years. Mrs. Henley started calling me over for tea sometimes, and I'd go, listening to her ramble about her grandkids, the quiet settling into something comfortable. One night, as the leaves turned gold and red, I sat on my porch, mug warm in my hands, looking out at the garden. It wasn't perfect. Some plants were scraggly, others still small, but it was growing, steady and sure. I thought about Clarissa and Rick, about the chaos they'd brought, the nights I'd spent angry and sleepless. I'd fought hard to make it stop, and I'd won. Not with fists or yelling, but with patience, with proof, with people like Brielle and Aiden stepping up when I least expected it. I didn't hate them anymore. Didn't need to. They were gone, and I was still here, my little house quiet, my lawn untouched. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness familiar and good, and let out a long breath. The fight was over, and the flowers were back. Sometimes, I realized, it's not about revenge, it's just about taking back what's yours and letting the rest go.